In the left-hand side of the screen, you're ready to start.
That's live, yes, Sam. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Development Standards Committee meeting this morning. Do you have any apologies?
No apologies, Convener.
Declarations of interest? Any declarations of interest?
Convener. Convener.
Councillor Cheap?
Sorry, Councillor McLaren, Councillor Moore and Councillor Cheap.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Moore. Councillor Moore, can we have you first?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, and regarding item 10, report 32320, as I declared last time, I have received representation from residents and objectors. However, I have only acknowledged their representations and have made no comment, so I shall continue in the meeting.
Councillor Cheap.
Yes, thank you, Convener. As a matter of thoroughness, I think I'd like to declare an interest in item 6, report 307/20. One of the directors of the company is the applicant, is a committee of Maniki and New Biggin Community Council, which I attend regularly. And in addition, I am acquainted with the family behind Den Fine Stone, but no more than that. But I will remain in the chamber and will vote on the matter.
Thank you. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Convener. I declare a non-financial interest in item 7, report 320/20. I'm a member of the Scottish Wildlife Trust and I note they have objected to the application. I had no input or knowledge of this letter. Therefore, I will take part in any discussion and voting.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? No, if there's no other declarations of interest, I'll move on to agenda. Yes.
Similar to Councillor Moore, I have received a number of communications from residents in the area of Conan South. I have not read any of these letters, so I'm just notifying the committee that I've received them.
Okay, right. Thank you, Councillor King. Anyone else? Any other declarations of interest?
Yes.
No. We'll
yes,
move on.
Convener.
Councillor Moore.
Yeah, I have missed the fact of the Scottish Wildlife Trust objecting. So like Councillor McLaren, I will declare an interest as a member of the SWT, but I was not aware of the letter.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Moore. Any other declarations of interest before I move on? No. Move on to agenda item 3, building warrants. This committee is asked to note that during the period the 10th of October to the 3rd of December 2020, a total of 89 building warrants, 1 late warrant, 4 demolition warrants, and 28 amendments to warrants have been approved with an estimated cost of £14,393,547. I repeat, £14,393,000 building warrants for Angus. I think that's a fantastic amount of money. That's comparing to something like 3 million the previous month. That noted?
Noted.
Agenda item 4, delegated decisions. The committee is asked to note that during the period 10th October to the 4th of December 2020, a total of 82 planning applications have been approved and 2 refused under the scheme of delegation to officers. Is that noted?
Noted.
Agenda item 5, minutes of the previous meeting. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. We'll move on to planning applications now. We'll move on to agenda item 6, Paterley, Quarry, Maniki. Could we have the slides, please? Come with the slides, please.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, committee members. If we can have the next slide, please. So the first planning application today is an application for the extension of Paterley Quarry near Maniki. This is an extension to provide for the extraction of rock and includes proposals for the restoration of the existing quarry that's present on site at the moment. We're looking at an extension which would provide in the region of 375,000 tonnes of material and it would be worked over a 50-year period with a further year provided for restoration. Now, the extraction rate is indicated to be around about 8,000 tonnes of material per year. Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. This slide just shows the general locality of the quarry. You'll see the two yellow stars in the middle of the screen. The bottommost of those identifies the existing quarry location, and the topmost star identifies the proposed location of the extension area. A couple of other features just draw to members' attention. We have Maniki reservoirs and the associated country park just sitting to the right-hand side to the northeast of the proposed extension area. I'll identify Denfind Plantation, which is the blue arrow that lies just to the north of the application site. There's some reference to a planning permission that provides for a glamping site within the plantation. So that's just the general location of that area. And there's also reference to proximity to Maniki. So just draw your reference to the purple arrow. The development boundary for Maniki finishes just to the south of the small housing development that we see in that location. So roughly 400 metres between the development boundary of the village and the proposed quarry extension itself. Also on that slide, you'll notice a small red dot and the public road that runs to the southeast of the site itself. That's running down to New Bigging and on to the A92 and Monifeith. Next slide, please. So just in a little bit more detail, this is the application site itself identified by the red line. You'll notice there is a black line that just divides the site. The southern part comprises the existing quarry void. That's in the region of 4 hectares in area. The area to the north of that is in agricultural use at the moment. It measures around about 9 hectares, but the area where extraction would take place is in the region of 4.5 to 5 hectares in area. There are a number of representations in relation to the application. Draw attention first of all to the green arrows. We have a representation looking at the top one first from the owners of Denfind Plantation. They've written in support of the proposal, suggested that the development that's proposed would not impact on their proposed glamping site. Also, green arrow to the right hand side of the screen, we have a representation from one of the occupiers of one of the Denfind cottages. The other blue dots that you see are just address points that are registered within our address gazetteer. So you can see there are a number of properties around about the area. The red arrows identify the properties where we've received objections. So starting at the bottom of the screen, you can see one of the 2 properties adjacent to the existing area have made representation in relation to the application. And we have 2 arrows just at the right-hand side of the screen. Topmost of those is a property that's reasonably close to phase 1 of the development. And the arrow below that represents a property called Tainamara. And I think we might have the occupant of that property here to speak today. You can see a number of the properties in the vicinity of the site have made representation both in support and objection to the application itself. Just in relation to the Tainamara property, the right-hand most of the red arrows, that's about 95 metres from its curtilage to the boundary of the application site, around about 120 metres from the boundary to the house itself. Moving on to the next slide, please. This slide, an aerial photograph that shows the current extraction area. This photograph is a few years old, so the extraction area will have altered a little bit over that period. But you can see the two properties identified by the yellow arrow at the bottom of the screen. Those properties, the houses themselves, I think around about 75 metres to the application site boundary. Moving on to the next slide, please. As I've said, a significant part of the proposal relates to restoration of the existing void, and you can see a plan here that shows the proposed restoration itself. The yellow arrow identifies an area of land identified as Area A, and that's an area where there's really very little to be done in relation to restoration. Certainly no change to landform. What we're looking at taking place within that area is planting of woodland, and you can see the green within that area, which signifies the woodland that I understand will shortly be planted. But no significant earthworks in that area. The two closest houses, unfortunately hidden behind the text box that identifies A, B, C and D, but two houses in there. So the area closest to those, no significant earthworks within that. The blue arrow identifies Area B, and that's an area where it's indicated the groundworks, the restoration within that area would be completed within a year of commencement of extraction within the extended area. So materials from the quarry extension, overburden, and some soils would be used to help restore the existing quarry void. And that area B, again an area very close to the neighbouring houses, would be restored within a year of commencement of construction. So you can see that in this area we've got progressive movement away from the closest houses. Total restoration time in this area is likely to be around about 11 years. So that equates to the extraction period within phase 1 of the new quarry. But ultimately, this area restored in the manner that you see on the slide before you. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Looking at the extraction area itself, that's the green field. Just pick out a couple of features on that if I can. The two yellow arrows identify electricity cable route. So we have a 33 kilovolt cable that runs roughly in a north-south direction, and that's significant as we see in terms of the slides that we'll look at in a short period of time. The blue arrow at the right-hand side of the screen identifies the closest properties. Those are the Denton farm cottages, and the two cottages that you see there are in the ownership and control of the applicant. Again, the purple arrow right-hand side of the screen identifies Panmure Road, and there are residential properties close to the site on Panmure Road. And again, just to the right-hand side of the blue arrow, we have the Tainamara property that you can just make out at the right-hand side of that screen. The other thing I'll pick out on this slide is the black arrow, and that shows the approximate location of the access to the new quarry area. So existing haul road within the existing quarry void is used. The material is extracted from the quarry extension and taken by the haul road to the existing Denton stone processing area. So no new processing area associated with this. What we're looking at is the material going from the quarry extension into the existing processing area. The application is described as an extension, and it's certainly an extension of the working area that we're looking at, existing quarry void restored, and a new working area. Although it's an extension, there's no increase in the output from the quarry. The existing quarry void is providing around about 8,000 tonnes per year. It's conditioned such that it can't produce more than that. and the intention is that the extension area would provide a similar level of output. So an extension in terms of the surface area that's worked, but no extension in terms of the actual scale of the operation itself. Next slide, please. So this is a plan that shows the working of the extension area. As I've indicated, we're looking at a quarry that has an operational life in the region of 50 years. The indication is it would be worked in 3 phases, and what we're looking at is the first of those phases. This is a phase that would last for a period of around 11 years. Again, just looking at the arrows, we have the yellow arrows, which shows the overhead power line, and to the immediate right, or to the east of that, you can see there is a proposal for a 3-metre high bund. So that bund is formed using materials from the site, and it's to act as an acoustic barrier and a visual barrier for the properties on Panmure Road. Again, purple arrow identifies the properties on Panmure Road, generally in the region of 75 metres from the property to the toe of the bund that you're seeing there. So a reasonable separation distance, and at 3 metres high, the impact of the bund on those properties itself is not significant, and we'll look at that in some photographs as we move through the presentation. The blue arrow again just identifies the Den Find cottages. Those are the closest properties to the application site and to the quarry extraction area, and the property picked out by that arrow, it's reasonably close to the quarry area. We're looking at round about 20 metres from the house to the toe of the bund, and about 45 metres from the house to the extraction area itself. But you'll see from the report that the impacts on the very close properties have been considered, and there are proposed conditions which seek to limit noise levels at the Den Find properties. That's limited to 55 decibels. That's an averaged figure. And at properties that are not in the ownership or control of the applicant, it's limited to 45 decibels. So 45 decibels is the lowest level that Scottish Government guidance indicates would generally be appropriate in a rural area. So the conditions that are limiting noise are quite stringent in this case. Again, just pick out the black arrow that's showing the entrance into the extended area, identifying the existing haul route that goes through the existing quarry void. That's retained and used, and we have the new access into the new working area. And the red arrow just identifies the working area. So this is phase 1. This is showing it at its full extent. In reality, that phase will be worked in sub-phases, working from the west towards the east. Next slide, please. So as I've said, worked in 3 phases. The proposal involves progressive restoration. So you can see the yellow arrow identifies what we were previously looking at as the phase 1. And you can see that there's, as we move into the phase 2 area identified by the red arrow, you can see there's restoration taking place within the phase 1 area. Material that's extracted, overburden that's extracted from the phase 2 area is moved into the phase 1 area to facilitate progressive restoration. Next slide, please. And again, the third phase, red arrow identifying the third phase of the workings. And again, yellow arrow identifies the phase 1 and phase 2, where we're seeing the progressive restoration as we move into the phase 3 area. Next slide, please. And this is a slide that shows the quarry at completion of development. This is a restoration plan. You can see this is sometime in the future. This will be around about year 50, 51. You can see the bottom quarry, the existing void, fully restored at that point in time. And you can see the restoration that's proposed to take place within the extension area. So some of that land is returned to agriculture, slopes that are reminiscent of the general landform in the area. We also have a water body that's formed, and some additional planting and scrub, effectively, which would create habitat within sections of the retained quarry void. Next slide, please. So we have a number of cross sections here. I don't want to dwell too long on those, given the size of them relative to the operation. But you can see generally, you get an impression of the depth of the working that's taking place here. We're generally talking about the extraction going down to a depth of about 20 to 25 metres below existing ground level. The green hatching that you see on the drawing just identifies areas where there is infill using overburden as part of the restoration proposals themselves. Next slide, please. This is a photograph taken from the northwest corner of the site. The top photograph is looking back towards the processing area. The blue arrow identifies the processing building itself that you can just see on the skyline. The red arrow identifies properties on Panmure Road. The bottom slide shows the same image, but with the bund in place. So you start to get an impression of the screening effect of the bund. Very little of the processing building visible once the bund is in place. And again, houses largely screened through the provision of that 3 metre high bund. Next slide, please. Again, just a view from Bona Vista. This is one of the properties on Panmure Road, property that's probably closest to the phase 3 extraction area. Similar idea here. In the top image, we have an existing view. The blue arrow shows the processing sheds. The bottom image shows the same image, but this time with the 3 metre bund provided. So again, you can see the processing buildings largely screened. You can see the electricity pylons, the overhead line just in the middle of that image. Again, for the houses in that area, the view towards the estuary is still retained at the left-hand side of the screen, and they do have the ability to see over the bund and to see the landscape beyond. Next slide, please. Similar image, this time from Narradain, another property slightly further down Panmure Road. Same idea again. Top image shows the existing view. Blue arrow identifies the processing building, and the bottom image shows the same view but with the bund in place. Again, indicating that the bund itself would be reasonably efficient in screening views of the quarry itself. Obviously, at the beginning of extraction period, activity will be evident. As we know, quarries do generate noise, they do generate dust, but we do have conditions that seek to regulate that. The assessments that have been done have considered potential impacts of noise and dust on the closest residential properties, and they do indicate that, subject to appropriate mitigation, the development can operate within acceptable and recognised tolerances. Just moving on to the next slide, please. And again, just another view, this time taken from the Denfin farm cottages, closest property to the quarry extension. The gable end of the property would be facing the bund, roughly a 25-metre separation distance between the bund and the property itself, with proposals for planting between the bund and the property and the provision of an acoustic fence. But again, the acoustic fence, the planting, the bund will provide a reasonable degree of screening for the activities within the extraction area. Next slide, please. So just bringing some of that together, we have an aerial image. The blue line that you see on the slide identifies roughly the location of the bund. Above that, you can see the properties on Panmure Road itself. Purple arrows pick out the two properties where we've received representations raising concerns about the proposal. I'm not sure how clearly you can make it out on that slide, but generally there is landscaping along the boundaries of those two properties that would face the quarry itself. The Tyne-Amara property, which is the right-hand most arrow, you can see has reasonable screening along its roadside boundary, separated from the extension area by the public road, and also separated by the Denfin cottages themselves. The orange arrow that you can see on the screen just picks out the area where there will be additional planting and where the acoustic fence would be provided. And the yellow tone that you see at the bottom of the slide identifies the approximate location of the extraction area itself. So again, I would suggest a reasonable separation distance between the extraction area and the objector's properties. Again, the assessments that have been undertaken demonstrate that, subject to the mitigation measures identified in the environmental impact assessment and the conditions that are proposed in association with this application, there should be no unacceptable impacts on the amenity of those properties. That's not to say they won't know there's a quarry there. It's a sizable development. It will be evident, but the impacts would be within recognised tolerances. Again, just to give some scale to this, we're talking about an extraction rate of 8,000 tonnes per year. Members familiar with the area will know that we've got Cunmont Quarry a short distance to the west. Cunmont not operational at the moment, but it's looking at extraction of around about 200,000 tonnes per year. This is 8,000 tonnes. So sizable development, but relatively small scale in terms of a quarry operation. Also, we have Effie Beaton and Ardownie located a distance to the south. Again, with those quarries, we're looking at extraction in the region of 500,000 tonnes per year, 8,000 tonnes in this case. So, as I say, just to give some indication of the difference in scale between the proposals. Next slide, please. This is a view from a distance to the south, around about 2 kilometres. The orange arrow, the top image, shows the view as existing. The image below that shows the image whilst there's working within the quarry area itself. At this type of distance, again, it will be seen, but I would suggest not hugely apparent within the landscape by virtue of the woodland that largely surrounds the site. I think it's fair to point out on the left-hand side of the screen, just behind that tree, there would be the Cunmont workings. They're not visible in this image, but certainly far greater in terms of landscape impact. Next slide, please. So just bringing some of this together, we have evidence that's set out in the report within the environmental assessment to indicate there is need and demand. There's a market requirement for the material that's produced from this quarry. We have policy requirements that look for us to maintain a market supply, and we think it's reasonable to grant permission for extension to the quarry to facilitate that. It's a material that's valuable to the local area. There's employment associated with its extraction. It's used within the construction industry, so there's associated employment in relation to that. 50 years is a sizable length of time, but as you can see, it's worked in phases, comparatively small phases at a period of time. And we have restoration proposals that will see the area restored over that period. We have a requirement for a restoration bond so that we have surety that the site will be restored in the longer term. There are representations from people that live in the vicinity, and it's understandable that people would be concerned about the impacts of this development. But the environmental impact assessment report, the assessment undertaken by our consultees, and our own assessment indicates that the quarry can operate in a method which should not give rise to unacceptable impacts on the amenity of those that live in the immediate area. Final slide, please. So again, just the aerial image. You can see the existing quarry area. For those that travel through that area, you'll understand that it's reasonably well screened from the surrounding area. Again, the extension area, reasonably well screened by virtue of the existing planting that's round about from public roads. The quarry will not be particularly visible because of the presence of the buildings that will form the perimeter of it. From those properties themselves, there'll be the provision of the bund, which provides mitigation, noise screening and visual screening. So overall, this proposal complies with our development plan policy. It provides the operator certainty regarding supply. It provides the market with supply, and it provides residents in the area with certainty regarding the conditions that apply to the environmental standards relative to the operation. It's compatible with development plan policy and is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Alan, for that very explicit demonstration. Questions for the officer. I will start off. A matter of clarity more than anything else. You mentioned Cunman and Etty Beaton, but I'm correct in thinking it's completely different types of material that they're quarrying compared to Dunfin stone?
Absolutely, Convener. I should perhaps have clarified that in the presentation. Cunman, as I say, is not operational at the moment. Etty Beaton and Downey, both operational. They both employ blasting, which is a significant difference from the proposal that we're looking at. Extraction at Denfin will be by excavator, no blasting at all. The other quarries, Etty Beaton and Downey, are extracting roadstone. The workings at Denfin, Paterley quarry, is proposed to extract sandstone for dimensional stone for use in the construction industry.
Right, thank you. Any other questions to the officer?
Convener, we've got a few. Councillor Miles, Councillor Moore, Councillor Cheap and Councillor Dunno.
Right, we'll start off with Councillor Miles.
Yes, Convener. Thank you, Alan, for that very comprehensive description. A couple of things. I'm not overly familiar with topography there. In the restoration works, there are ponds shown. Do they naturally drain into Paterley burn, or what is their drainage outlets?
Yeah, the land is generally sloping towards the Paterley burn, so generally sloping in a southwesterly direction towards the burn. The pond in the southernmost of the quarries is existing. I would imagine long-standing. The quarry void there has been there for a very long time, and the pond associated with it has been there for a long period of time. The pond that would be formed within the extension area does not exist at the present time. It's good productive agricultural land at the moment. There will be effectively a den created through the restoration proposals, a low point in that where surface water will likely collect and subsequently drain down to Paterley Burn. Yes.
Okay, a further point, you said that's good agricultural land at the moment. The restoration works look as if they're creating more recreational parkland rather than agricultural land. There's no requirement to recreate agricultural land as opposed to parkland after the development.
There's scope for the applicant to do different things. Restoration can typically be to agricultural land, amenity land, or woodland. There's no requirement for the land to be restored to agriculture, but certainly in relation to the northern extension area, the proposals do include restoration of a significant part of that to agricultural land. I perhaps should have clarified that the development is operated in phases. So as phase 1 is worked, the future phases 2 and 3 continue to be used as agricultural land. So it's not as if we're sterilising all the agricultural land at one point in time. That land remains available whilst phase 1 is worked.
Thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Convener. I've got a few questions. Alan, you say that the company will remove 8,000 tonnes per year. What's that look like? I can't, how much is a tonne? How in cubic meters?
So my understanding is that 8,000 tonnes equates to just under 3,500 cubic metres, if that helps.
Thank you, it does. And on pages 185 to 188, these mock-ups of the bunds are shown, quote, at phase 3. But are the bunds being put in prior to the works commencing?
So yes, I think the phase 1 drawing in the presentation identifies the presence of the bunds, and the requirement is that certainly the easternmost of the bunds, the bund that provides the separation between the working area and the houses in Panmure Road, would be provided before any other development takes place. The bund along the northern boundary is only required in the event that the tourism development within the plantation takes place, and we have conditions that seek to control the timing and the phasing of that.
Right, thank you. And you've commented about the noise levels. Are there hours of condition, and can those be conditioned? Hours of operation?
Yeah.
Can we say they can't go past 7 in the evening?
So you'll notice condition, give me just a brief second. I think it's condition 8 in the papers, Councillor Moore, that sets hours of operation for the quarry.
Wonderful, thank you.
You, Councillor Moore. Okay, we'll move on anyway. Councillor Cheap.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Mr. Hunter, thanks very much again for the extensive presentation, and along with other councillors, I hope, who would have read all the papers, some of these questions would have been answered already. It's an extensive read, the report, a very thorough read, but just because we're on Zoom, I can't see the papers in front of me right at the very moment, but I have gone through everything. Can you remind me on 2 things? One, on the 3 phases we've talked about and were demonstrated. In the papers, do we give specific dates when phase 1 will commence and effectively end, 2 commence and end, and 3? We know it's a 50-51 year project of development and restoration. But have we got any specific dates? I can't recall that in the report seeing period dates.
There's not specific period dates set. Obviously, the applicant has a period of 3 years within which to commence the development. The conditions require the quarry to be operated in accordance with the environmental impact assessment report. The environmental impact assessment report attaches timescales to the extraction within each of the phases. So phase 1 is indicated to last approximately 11 years. Phase 2 is identified to last approximately 15 years. And phase 3 is identified to last approximately 21 years. Now, the nature of the operation is there will be a degree of fluidity between phases. As you're coming towards the end of phase 1, you will commence works, soil stripping, overburden removal within the phase 2 area. So it's not possible to be prescriptive in terms of timescales, but there are indications within the environmental impact assessment report, and the conditions require the development to be undertaken in accordance with that report.
Okay, thanks for that. And you did just remind me, because I had read these 11, 15, 21 in the reports. They were in there after all. The other question I've got is just I was noticing in the representations that from various people, but one in particular, when we're talking about the bunds, and we referred to them this morning, is there in the conditions on the bunds part of things, is it, it's a 3 metre bund in place. Is it a 3 metre bund of just earth, rock and earth? I've seen this in other places before. On your diagrams, they're showing very green, as if they've been grassed or shrubbed or whatever. Is there any condition that says they're not just a mound of earth that's put in there?
So again, the environmental impact assessment report, the applicant's information identifies that the soil, the bunds would be finished with topsoil and planted in grass. And again, we have the general condition which requires development to be undertaken in accordance with the environmental impact assessment report itself. So that requirement is followed through in the conditions.
Great, thank you very much indeed.
Councillor Durno. Councillor Durno, do you have questions? Am I correct in thinking that Councillor Durno had a question?
Yes, convener. I think she's struggling to get her. Oh, there she is.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's it, Councillor Durno.
Thanks, Alan, for your presentation. Some of the questions some of the answers coming through are some of the questions I had, but in that area in particular, I know you said there's not an awful lot of traffic, more traffic going to be on that road, but that area is prone to flooding, because I've actually lost a car in that area before with flooding. And I'm wondering, with the new development, and it's going to take stages, is this going to result in, when the earth's removed, etc., more flooding with these flash floodings that we have? Is that going to result in more flooding? Is one question. And the second question is, if there's going to be more vehicles, that road is really small, is it going to be able to take more lorries? And it's just flooding in lorries and the road, that's really what I'm concerned about. If you could maybe give me some assurances on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Durno. The environmental impact assessment has looked at hydrology and hydrogeology in the area, so it's considered potential flood risk, consulted with our colleagues in the roads flooding team, and we've consulted with SEPA, and neither has raised any concerns regarding any potential for increased flooding in the area. The applicant has suggested that in the longer term, because we're creating an additional void, if anything, there'll be some net benefit in relation to flooding in the area, because there'll be a hole effectively within which water can gather before it goes anyplace else. But I think the applicant suggested that's a fairly marginal benefit, but certainly no indication that there'll be any increased flood risk as a consequence of the development. In terms of vehicle movements, the existing quarry extracts 8,000 tonnes of material per year. The proposed extension will extract 8,000 tonnes of material per year. That's the maximum figure. So there's no expectation that the development will generate additional traffic in itself because it's operating at the same level as the existing business.
Thanks for that. Can I just come back and say, could we maybe get an assurance that we're not going to get tons of mud on that road while this development's going on? Because I have real problems with some roads at the moment where the mud coming down the road after we've had this really bad rainfall that we'll have, and the mud's not being cleared off the road. And if there's going to be major development here, can we get some assurances from the developers that they're not going to have, you know, the road full of mud while this is going on? Because it's not fair on the residents that live there. Thank you.
So the existing quarry dispatches material to the processing yard, and the proposal is that the extension will deliver material to the existing processing yard. So the quarry traffic itself will not be entering the public road. It's vehicles from the processing facility itself, which you'll recall we approved a couple of years ago, just an extension to that facility. And certainly under the Roads Traffic Scotland Act, there are requirements for people to ensure that the road is maintained as best as possible, free of debris.
That's great. Thanks for that.
Have you any more questions to the officer?
Am I permitted?
Sorry, excuse
No.
Mr. Stout, can I ask you please to mute? You'll get your turn after the members have asked their questions. Convener, we've got Councillor Braze.
Councillor Braze.
Yes, sorry, Convener, it's more of a comment that I have now. My original questions have been answered.
We're on questions at the moment. We're on questions to the officer at the moment.
Yeah, I'll wait.
Chance to comments later on. Any other questions to the officer?
No further questions, Convener.
Well, now we'll move on to our speakers. We have Graham Stout. Graham Stout, you can come in now.
Okay, thank you. I am...
You have 5 minutes.
Okay, resident at Tynamara. I would like to point out that while I've officially down as an objection to the proposal, I was actually really looking for an amendment to the proposal and some of the safety measures, because I, as a local resident, don't have any issues with the quarry per se, and I wouldn't object to it going ahead. I just have certain fears over the way this application has gone through. It will be a question we'll come back on. We talked a lot about the noise levels and averages, and now averages are not my interest at all. I want to know what the maximums are and what will happen when we've got machines that run up to 110 decibels in the, usually with the reversing light, reversing beepers. So I'd like to get clarity on that. Is the 45 decibels the government maximum that we should have at the residential properties, or is this an average? I would like to say from my screen, from my window looking out, I can see over the fields frequently dust coming across the fields in front of the house, which caused with the prevailing winds. And my fear is, as this development goes north, the prevailing winds are going to take the dust right across the properties that are obviously further north than where the wind's going at the moment. My proposal and the letter I put in suggested that the proposal should have really worked from west to east rather than from south to north, because with depths of up to 25 meters, you would have a natural wall of rock to prevent the sound and direct the dust away from the properties. So these were just really points that I had. And when it comes to the measurement, how do we as residents know that we're having this monitored on an ongoing basis to ensure that if we I work in industry, I know occasional incidents can happen, but if you've got a frequent issue, you know, something where the levels are being exceeded on an ongoing basis, what recourse do the residents have? Thank you.
Questions to Mr. Stout?
No questions, convener.
Okay. Oh, sorry. By the way, I should have said earlier, with the talking about flooding, I don't see there being any issue with flooding at the quarry, and it wouldn't affect the roads. There is mud on the roads, but this comes from the fields rather than anything that would happen at this development. There's also a natural wall, earth wall between the stream river that runs to the west, and the water flowing down into the pond possibly could seep through the rock, but it wouldn't flow into that. The way the ground's shaped, it wouldn't flow into the river naturally.
Okay, Mr. Stout. Any questions to Mr. Stout?
Councillor Cheap, convener.
Councillor Cheap.
Yeah, thanks, convener. It's very quick, Mr. Stout. Just I'm listening intently to what you're saying. I can't comment on the west to east side of things you mentioned. The planning is the planning application, but there is a condition I'm aware of on noise, and particularly you mentioned about reversing vehicles, and there are two stipulations on that in the conditions. So if I just can address your attention to that part alone, that I can comment on as a councillor, that's all. Thanks.
Okay, we'll move on. I think I'd just like a comment at the moment. I think everything has been taken care of in the presentation on the issues that Mr. Stout is coming up with it. So just move on to our next speakers. We've got Mr. Binney and Mr. Booth. Yeah, applicant and agent. Can you come forward, please?
We're just waiting on them.
Hi.
To mute. Yes, Mr. Booth.
Hi, it's William Booth here. I'm the agent for applicant. I wouldn't like to actually comment on the overall development. I think the planning officer's done that very competently. I would just like to provide a little bit of clarification with regards to the points Mr. Stout raised. The 45 decibels is an hourly average. This is how noise is monitored. That's how the government has set it out and requires it to be monitored, and that is how environmental health applies it for the existing quarry and for all other quarries in Angus and across the countryside. Reversing alarms have what's called white noise reversing, which actually puts out a noise which is different from the beep beep that used to be on reversing alarms years ago, and it's much less intrusive and doesn't carry the same impact as noise had previously. The dust that is sometimes visible in there is the dust within the processing area, and it largely stays within that area. The processing won't change, it will continue to be at that point, so there won't be a shift of dust. The actual rock excavation relates to lifting out just blocks of rock. There's no crushing or processing or anything of that nature which will give rise to dust. So in that effect, there should be very little change in dust at the local properties. With regards to monitoring, there are requirements for noise monitoring, dust monitoring. Dust monitoring with dust monitors is actually undertaken at the moment and will be ongoing for the life of the quarry. And all this monitoring information will be available to both the Planning Authority and Environmental Health. And the planning officer has actually put a condition in place which requires annual auditing of the site, which means that annually they will be reviewing all the monitoring effects, etc., and any issues that have been raised, so that they can ensure that they are actually keeping, you know, a firm control on everything that happens at the site. That's really all I have to say. Thank you. If there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer these. I'm not sure if Brian would perhaps like to make some comments just from a company point of view. Thank you.
Mr. Binney, you making comments?
Yeah, I'd just like to make quick comments. And we've obviously been operational now since 2004. that the Binnies have been on the farm at Denfin since 1947. We take our responsibilities with regards to the local environment and the broader environment extremely seriously. We work very hard at maintaining that, and we will continue to welcome any communication with neighbours that helps with us to continue to act in a way that we've demonstrated over these years, and hopefully we look forward to do so in the future as well.
Thank you. Any questions to Mr. Binney or Mr. Booth?
Convener Cheap, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Just that was me not having lowered my hand before, but I was going to increase it and raise it anyway. Mr. Binney, morning. We've heard the full presentation this morning so far. Reading through all the papers, there is an extensive list of conditions attached by council officers to the application were it to proceed. I just really just to ask for you as an operator, having read these conditions, can you adhere to them, and can you operate successfully while adhering to them?
Yep, thanks for the question. Yes, we've, as I said, we started operating out of Paterley in 2004, and there's been significant growth within the business over that period of time, and with that comes responsibilities that you must adhere to. The current conditions that we work under, we operate under comfortably, and the conditions that have been put in place, whilst they're extensive, we've been fully aware of what our responsibilities would need to be for a considerable amount of time anyway. So there's nothing coming at us there that is unexpected or that we feel that we can't work within, and we'll continue to do so as much as possible. Well, we'll just continue to do so going forward. Yeah, we have no concerns with regards to the conditions now.
Thank you.
Any more questions to the applicant?
No further questions, Convener.
Do members wish to make any comments at this stage?
Councillor Brace, Convener.
Councillor
Brace and Councillor Cheap.
Yes, you would want to make comments, Councillor Brace.
Yes, thanks, Convener. It seems to me that the applicants have made various improvements at considerable expense, no doubt, to their work practices over the years. And this application is for a continuation of their existing practice and trade. There's to be no increase in production. And I know that, it does raise concerns for people living in the vicinity of a quarry. It's very understandable, but, as far as quarrying goes, this is probably the best thing to have in your vicinity. So, yeah, I think it's a really good application. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Convener, we have Councillor Cheap, Miles and Duff.
Cheap, who did you say? Cheap, Miles and Duff?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Cheap.
Yeah, thanks. Convener, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, it's similar to Councillor Brace. As far as I can see, Convener, this is an application for the continuation of an existing local industry. As put by one of those people submitting a representation I read, it's a relocation rather of where quarrying is already occurring rather than an expansion of it. Annual volumes are not planned to increase, but rather continue at the same level for the foreseeable future. And I think we should be pleased that a local business can produce such high quality material and in so doing satisfy demand from all over the UK and beyond. Naturally, there is concern by those opposing this application with regard to environmental impact, amenity and health. However, I'm heartened to read how highly this company is regarded in the industry in terms of its consideration of environmental impact and the safety and welfare of its employees and the community. And I'm equally heartened to read the lengths this company has gone in compiling such an extensive and thorough environmental impact assessment report. And I'd like to thank the officers for the thoroughness of the preparation of Report 30720. There's a very clear plan of stage development and extensive conditional reinstatement that must be adhered to as a condition of this application if it's passed today. The extent of reinstatement should help put the minds at rest of those in the immediate neighbourhood. I recognise that a large volume of support comes from out with the community, customers, suppliers, etc., but there appears to be as much, if not more, local support than detractors. Indeed, I have only received emails on the matter from one local resident. The extent of the list of supporting conditions as an addendum to this application compiled by council officers satisfies me of the extent that must be adhered to. Also, we have heard from the directors that they will support these and be able to achieve their objectives while working within the constraints of the conditions. I've read the comments from neighbours to this site that support Denfinestone as being, quote, a respectful neighbour and very in tune with the community, unquote. I feel it's vital in these uncertain times that we support local rural industry, and as a result of this and the points already made, I will support this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
Right, thank you, convener. I've been having net problems this morning, so I hope you hear me all right. No, I'm very much in favour of this proposal. They have operated very successfully in the recent past with due care to the environment around about, and it is a high quality material and had many compliments and representations from others to see how well this company is run. So I have absolutely no concerns extending this life of this quarry will operate in any other way. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I'd like to thank Mr. Hunter for a really excellent presentation. I think we got all the detail there that we would like, and I think it's been a very thorough report. Really just echoing my colleagues, I think this is a very successful locally run rural business, and I think we should be supportive of it continuing to be successful. It implies employment and obviously adds to our economic effort in Angus. So definitely very much in support of it. And, you know, rural Angus is not just a playground. It should be a place that people work and run businesses. And for that reason, I'm very much in support of the application.
Thank you. Any other comments?
No other comments, convener.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
sorry, can I comment?
No.
Okay.
We'll move on. Yes, I'm happy to move this report. This is a very well-run business which has been quarrying very much needed sandstone, which is not obtainable anywhere else in Angus, and it's won many business awards. So I'm really quite happy and delighted to move this report for approval. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Therefore, 20/00587 is approved with the conditions attached. That's agreed?
Agreed.
Right, move on to agenda item 7. This is for planning application for a caravan site at Bellwood Nursery, Brighton, Ruthven for 41 caravans. Could we have the slides, please?
Sorry, convener, I was just making sure I'd unmuted there. Thank you. Item 7 relates to an application for planning permission for the change of use of a former tree nursery to form a holiday caravan park for 40 holiday caravans, which would include the construction of pitches and associated infrastructure on land at the former Bellwood Tree Nursery, Brigton of Ruthven. Can we have the next slide, please? The application site is located to the westerly extent of Angus, around about 4 kilometres to the east of Ayleth and around about 350 metres south of the A926 as it passes through Ruthven village. Moving to the right-hand side ordnance survey plan, the application site is identified by the red line. There are two main components to it. The caravans will be located in the larger area shown within the red polygon, as illustrated by the red star. The application would also involve a wastewater pipe being installed going to a northeast before projecting east towards the River Isla, where treated wastewater from the development would discharge into the River Isla in the approximate position of the yellow star. Access to the site will be taken from the unclassified 100 public road, where it would connect to an access track going into the site at the position of the green star. And just by way of context, the village of Ruthven, or the small hamlet of Ruthven, is located to the north in the approximate position of the blue star. Could we have the next slide, please? So in terms of the development plan position, the local development plan aims to encourage new tourist-related facilities and accommodation in appropriate locations. So the local development plan is very much supportive of tourism development in appropriate locations, recognising that it makes an important contribution to the rural economy. A wee bit more detail about what the actual development within the site would involve. The site's around about 1.92 hectares in size. 41 caravans would be formed, as illustrated by the green rectangles on the plan. They would be formed around a central amenity space and play space. In the southwest corner of the site, drainage infrastructure will be formed by way of surface water management system and a biodisc wastewater treatment system. Treated wastewater would then be pumped up to the northeast, where the treated sewage outfall would discharge into the River Isla off to the east of the site, around about 100 metres to the east of where the caravans will be located. Access to the site would come in from the northeast, as you'll see from the position of the green star. That would connect to a private access track. Along that access track, 2 passing places would be formed before the site would connect to the unclassified 100 public road to the west, which is shown by the position of the yellow star. I'd also draw members' attention to the green band which surrounds the site on its west and northeast sides, as shown by the purple star. That's a mature line of trees which provides a landscape backcloth to the site. It's also worth noting that the site sits at a lower level than the adjacent land to the north and to the public road to the north. So it sits at a lower level and it benefits from a fairly substantial landscape backcloth. So both of those features should ensure that development within the site sits down and sits reasonably comfortably within the landscape, with views limited of the site from the north, and views from the south looking north would be screened to an extent or backclothed by the landform and woodland that exists in that area. Could we have the next slide, please? So this is illustrates that point slightly better. As you'll see with the yellow star, the position of the mature trees which run along the northwest side of the site and provides that landscape framework for development within the site. The area isn't currently in productive or crop production use, unlike the other land further to the south. It was part of the Bellwood Tree Nursery, so it was a commercial tree plantation, which attracted a level of traffic associated with that commercial operation. The caravans will be located around about the area which is shown by the purple star, with most of the drainage infrastructure located in the position of the red star. And you'll see the approximate position of the treated drainage outfall, which projects to the east and discharges into the River Isla in the position of the blue star. Can we have the next slide, please? Just a couple of shots of the site then. This one's taken from the southeast corner of the site looking west. Members will see from the foreground that the site isn't in productive or crop production use. It does contain some remnants of the former tree nursery, and the caravans will be located in the foreground in this area. But also draw members' attention to the mature tall trees which are located on the right-hand side, and the bank they're located on. So that resembles, or that would represent a reasonably substantial landscape feature that would allow development within the site to sit down, and which would reduce the level of landscape and visual impacts associated with the development. Coupled with the applicant's additional planting, it's considered that landscape and visual impacts, while would not be unacceptable, there would be some views of the site in positions close to the site, but those impacts are not considered to be unacceptable. Could we have the next slide, please? So the objections received by to the application from the Community Council, from the I think 28 members of the public, relate to 2 main points. One relates to impacts on the natural environment, and one relates to impacts on road traffic and pedestrian safety. There are other points that are addressed in the report, but they're considered to be the two main issues. In terms of impacts on the natural environment, the proposal would involve the formation of a treated wastewater outfall into the River Isla. Now, the River Isla forms part of the River Tay Special Area of Conservation. That designation is in place because of, amongst other things, the protected species of Atlantic salmon, of otters, and of lamprey. Now, the applicant has submitted supporting information in the form of an ecological impact assessment and a fish and aquatic assessment, which identifies that, subject to appropriate mitigation, impacts associated with the development would not be unacceptable. A construction method statement will be required to manage impacts around about the formation of the sewage outfall, but that information submitted has been considered by both SEPA and Nature Scott, the new name for SNH. Both of those parties consider impacts could be mitigated and would not be unacceptable. SEPA considers the proposed foul drainage arrangements to be acceptable, having regard to the high dilution capacity of the River Isla for the fairly limited discharge that would come from the site. SNH has commented on the proposal. They do not consider impacts on the qualifying interests of the River Tay SAC would be significant. The application has been subject to an appropriate assessment in terms of the habitat regs, and that shows that, subject to appropriate mitigation, impacts on the natural environment would not be significant or unacceptable. In terms of other nature conservation value of the site, as you saw in the previous photograph, is partly previous developed land. The site itself doesn't have any significant nature conservation or habitat value, but mitigation measures are attached which should address any issues associated with the development and ensure new landscaping which might have a net improvement in terms of the specific offer of the site just now. Could we have the next slide, please? So the second main source of concern relating to the proposal relates to impacts on the local road network. So those impacts could be in two forms. One associated with the construction of the development, and two associated with the operation of the development. The applicant has carried out a transport assessment and a passing places report, which suggests that impacts associated with the development would not be significant. In terms of construction traffic, obviously during the construction process, there would be a requirement for larger vehicles to access the site. It's likely they would come from the A926 to the north along the what is a fairly narrow U100 public road, which extends around about 400 metres from its junction with the A926 in a southerly direction. But following discussions with the road service, it's considered that impacts associated with construction traffic could be mitigated, and a planning condition is proposed requiring a construction traffic management plan and a routing plan. In terms of impacts associated with the operation of the development, the transport assessment suggests that the development would generate approximately 93 daily trips between the times of 7 AM in the morning and 10 PM at night, which equates to around one vehicle movement every 7 to 10 minutes. So the transport assessment suggests that the impacts on the local road network would not be significant. Notwithstanding that, and having regard to the comments received from the Community Council and from the third parties who live in the surrounding area, there are concerns about the impacts on the unclassified public road, which stretches between the site and the A926 to the north. And the applicants, at our request, has gone away to look at those impacts and has indicated that they would be in a position to increase the capacity of that road by providing intervisible passing places to a proposed between the A926 and the junction of the site, as illustrated by the drawing in front of members. The passing places would be, or could be formed on site. The site's been checked. They could be formed within the road verge, allowing for a width of 5 metres and a length of around about 12 metres. The road service has considered all of the information available, as having regard to the previous use of the site as a commercial tree nursery, which would have attracted a degree of traffic, having regard to the concerns raised by third parties, and having regard to the supporting information submitted. The road service considers impacts associated with the development on the local road network would not be unacceptable. Could we have the next slide, please? So just to show members slightly more clearly the condition of the U100 public road. So this is a 400-metre stretch of road between the A926 to the north and the entrance to the application site to the south, 400 metres to the south. So the photograph, the first photograph, 3.15, shows the view looking south from the junction with the public road. The first passing place is in the approximate position of the telegraph pole on the left. The second slide is taken from the 3.16 is taken from the first passing place looking south to the second passing place. So it just illustrates that there would be intervisibility between the two passing places that would be formed. The third photograph is taken looking from the second passing place, looking back up the hill, up back to the north towards the first passing place, just again illustrates that intervisibility would be available. Now you'll see from the photographs that the road verge is quite narrow, but the applicant has taken site-specific measurements and has proposed passing places in the widest points of the road. And the road service is satisfied that that arrangement could be achieved and could be accommodated within the boundaries of the road. Could you have the next slide, please? Finally, 3.18 is taken looking from the second passing place south, downhill towards the entrance to the site, and 3.19 looking back north. So again, this illustrates that the passing places, while the transport assessment says they're not required, the applicant is prepared to make additional measures to increase the capacity of the road to accommodate additional traffic associated with the operation and development. And the road service is happy with that arrangement, having regard to the information available. Could we have the next slide, please? So bringing matters together, the development plan position is supportive of tourism development in appropriate locations and where impacts can be mitigated. In this case, it's considered that impacts can be mitigated subject to the extensive planning conditions recommended before members. Impacts on the natural environment can be mitigated. SNH and SEPA are both happy that impacts would not be unacceptable. It's also considered that, having regard to the fairly substantial landscape framework that exists, the fact that the site's at a lower level, it's considered that while there would be some landscape and visual impacts associated with the development, they would be reasonably localized, and it's considered that the site could accommodate the development without significant or unacceptable landscape and visual impacts. 28 objections have been submitted to the proposal, one of which has been subsequently withdrawn since the report was published, and there's also an objection from the Community Council. Those objections have been touched upon in the presentation and are addressed in the report before members. The Economic Development Service has offered support for the development, commenting that it would help to meet demand for tourist accommodation and to help grow the rural economy in the surrounding area. So on that basis, the application is considered to comply with the development plan. A number of conditions are proposed, requiring or preventing the use of caravans as dwellings or as permanent or principal accommodation to ensure that they do meet a tourist market, requiring the appropriate formation of passing places along the U100, requiring a construction management plan and a construction method statement to protect the SAC, the Special Area of Conservation, requiring landscaping and adherence to the various mitigation measures promoted in the supported information. So the application is considered to comply with the development plan. Officers consider there are no material considerations that would justify refusal of planning permission, and on that basis, the application is recommended for approval.
Right, thank you. Questions to the officer?
Sorry, I just can't seem to see the list. It's disappeared. Could you just bear with me 1 second until the slides are removed from the screen, and I think that will help me. Okay, so we've got councillors Durno, Duff, Cheap, Moore and Braze.
Right, we'll start with Councillor Durno.
Thanks, convener. Because we have a considerable lot of caravan parks in my area, the concerns I have is the refuse collection in this area, is it sufficient to handle 44 caravans of extra rubbish, or would this have to be a new facility put on, or will the rubbish be collected on site, or will it have to go at the end of the road, or do you think there'll be any problems at all with regards pickup of rubbish from the site? Being a tourist site, there's always quite a lot of rubbish. People go there for the weekend, etc. That's the only concerns I have, is the facilities in the area might not be able to cope with the 44 caravans of extra rubbish. I'm not sure what the facilities are like in that area. Thanks.
So the proposal will require a caravan site license, which regulates that type of issue to ensure that appropriate waste management facilities are in place. So that would be a matter for the applicant to resolve, but at this stage, there's no information to suggest that an appropriate solution can be made for waste management within the site.
Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thank you, convener, and thanks to Mr. Taylor for again an excellent presentation. I thought the slides of the road were very useful because I had one question about the road, and I think that's been satisfactorily answered. Maybe I missed it in the report. I mean, is this site intended to be a tourist site, or are these residential caravans? From the sort of artist impression, they look more like what you might term fixed caravans rather than touring caravans. Have we got any information on that?
Sorry, I perhaps would have been a bit clearer in my presentation or in the report. The application proposes static caravans for the purposes of tourist accommodation. So the applicants indicated that they would expect the caravans would be occupied for 11 months of the year, but planning conditions are attached to which would ensure that they could only be occupied as tourism development, effectively limiting the amount of time people could be present in the caravans.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. So that means that we aren't going to have cars towing caravans going along this 400-metre unclassified road. So it's people are going to be arriving in cars, leaving in cars, and the caravans are fixed. That's excellent. Thanks for that clarification.
Councillor Cheap.
Thanks, Convener. Just my question is kind of on the back of what Councillor Duff has just raised, because I presume there were static caravans as well. My concern slightly for that is that trying to get upwards of 40 static caravans down that road and into that site, it will be an operation that I would love to see. But that's one question that they may need to have some thought ahead of all of this. The second bit was, I'm always concerned when I see a condition that says that to stop occupancy year round. How would we adhere to that? How would we get people to adhere to that? Because we've had many examples, one not terribly far from me, where it was meant to be basically a similar sort of thing that turned into now basically a caravan village of permanent occupancy. So how do we actually adhere that people won't be actually staying year round in particularly static caravans, which are 30, 40 feet in length?
So there's a planning condition attached which requires the operator of the site to maintain a register of guests on the site. So basically recording when people enter and leave the site. Now, obviously, the condition's written in a way that we consider it to be an enforceable one, but the register of guests puts an onus on the applicant to maintain records of when people are entering and leaving the site. Now, we have had issues on other sites, but we've also been effective with our enforcement of some of the sites where we've had issues. So we consider the issue, the planning condition proposed to be sufficient to deal with that matter. There's no indication from the information submitted that the proposal will be for anything other than occasional tourist use of the site.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Breeze.
Right, thank you, convener. Yes, my question was around the road again, like Councillor Duff and Councillor Cheap. It's obviously, well, to me, it's obvious that there has to be passing places put in, and I'm glad to see that that's a condition. Will those passing places be put in before any development is allowed to commence?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. My understanding is that the report requires the passing places to be formed prior to any other development.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions to the officers?
Yes, Convener.
Councillor King.
Yes, just to ask Mr. Taylor, back again on this question of people establishing residency in caravan sites. Mr. Taylor, can you confirm as it's my understanding that any sites where we've had problems with people establishing residency as a permanent basis had pre-existing caravans prior to we introduced the policy of limiting the period that people could stay on the sites. I mean, I'm thinking particularly of the one that I think Councillor Cheap is thinking about, which is at Barry Downs, which was there for many, many years, and the operator claimed prior established rights on that one. But this is a new one, and the operator wouldn't be able to do that. Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor King. I would agree with your comment there. Now, obviously, a lot of the old caravan site permissions were historic. Things have evolved over time. We've learned from our experience of what's happened on different caravan sites, and that's why conditions are designed the way they are now to sort of deal with that issue.
Any other questions to the officer?
Councillor Moore and Councillor Nicholl.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Convener. Mr. Taylor, would you agree with me when you say in paragraph 813 that there is noise and activity in around the site, that there is somewhat different between a commercial operation that's working during the day and 41 caravan pictures all being occupied on a 24/7 basis? Has any consideration been given to that element of the noise?
So yes, I mean, the impacts associated with a commercial tree nursery would be different from the impacts associated with a caravan park. But it's considered that the caravan park impacts associated with that would not be substantially different from sort of normal residential activities which are found immediately adjacent to the site. So those impacts aren't considered to be unacceptable, having regard to the relationship of the development to surrounding property.
Right. And picking up a point that Councillor Durno was on, what about waste management? I mean, there's not just the rubbish truck coming in and emptying, there's keeping the site clean and clear and stopping dogs fouling, etc. What impacts that's going to have on the site and the area?
Well, obviously the planning system cannot regulate illegal activities in terms of things like dog fouling, but as I said there to Councillor Durno's question, there is a requirement, I think, under the caravan sites legislation as part of the caravan site licence to have appropriate waste management facilities located within the site.
And you said about road traffic, about every 7 to 10 minutes average. Now, we can't regulate that and say, you've got to go at this time. It's all right saying, well, it's going to be 7 to 10 minutes average, but people are going to stay. They're going to get up on the morning. They're all going to go out to visit the sites. And you're probably going to have about, what, 20, 30 vehicles within 10, 20 minutes, all going out of the site. What impact is that going to have on the residents nearby?
Well, I mean, the applicant has proposed passing places to increase capacity in the road network to deal with that. I mean, it is, as you suggest, it is an average, but the transport assessment suggests that traffic levels would not be significant. Now, the traffic that would be entering and leaving the site would be using the public road network. I mean, we're not. I don't think the level of development having regard to what's in the transport assessment would result in such great impacts on amenity that those impacts would be unacceptable.
Yeah. And just one more question. I believe that they will still need to go for licensing, for a license to operate.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Any other questions to the officer?
Councillor Nicholl, convener.
Who?
Councillor Nicholl.
Oh yes, of course, Councillor Nicholl, yes.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Convener, rather. The formation of the passing places on the U100 would mean the removal of the banking which supports the dry stone dyke. Would there be some form of shoring required, or would it encroach on the neighbour's ground?
So the information submitted in the passing places report suggests that the passing places could be formed entirely within the road verge and not needing to go out with the road verge. Obviously, it's assumed that the passing places would be competently formed and done carefully so that they wouldn't damage adjacent property. But obviously, if there was any damage caused, that will be a civil matter between the parties involved. But I think the applicant's agent would probably confirm that they would rectify any issues that were caused in the construction of the passing places.
Thank you very much.
I've one question, Officer. You didn't bring up the cladding and, the description of the cladding and what the caravans would be cladded with it. Can you explain it a bit more on the visual appearance of the caravans?
Sure. As is often the case with the more modern caravans, the information, there is a brochure submitted with the application which suggests they would be either clad in timber or have a sort of painted timber clad effect. It does appear that there will be recessive colours, but the planning application is actually for the siting of the caravans, not the caravans themselves. The caravans aren't development. So what we're assessing is the caravan pitches, but the information in the brochure submitted suggests they will potentially be finished in timber or a timber cladding type of effect, but either way, a sort of recessive shade.
Okay, right. What amazes me, this does say a caravan site. In the English dictionary, it says a caravan is usually pulled by a car. It just amazes me why this has been described as a caravan site. However, that's beside the point. Any other questions to the officer?
Convener, Councillor Cheap and Councillor Moore still have their hands up. I just want to confirm that they've got no further questions.
Cheap or Moore?
No, I think that's just from previous convener.
I don't have a question. I just can't seem to lower my hand, I'm afraid.
Okay, we'll move on to our speakers then. Firstly, we have local member, Councillor Angus McMillan Douglas, who wishes to speak. Councillor McMillan Douglas.
Convener, thank you very much. Yes, I would like to speak, please. My name is Councillor Angus McMillan Douglas. I'm one of the local councillors for Kirriemuir and Dean. I commend the diligence of our officers for bringing forward this report and for the report that we've just had presented to us. But I do think that the recommendation does throw up some anomalous conclusions and leave some important issues outstanding. Despite being in the middle of Strathmore, the land concerned is not considered to be prime agricultural, and therefore that isn't taken account in this recommendation. This seems to me to set a dangerous precedent that neglect can assist a planning application. After all, this was a tree nursery, and if you go back to the owners before that, this was a ploughed field. Secondly, there has apparently, and I'm only reliant on other people telling me this, there has apparently been no support from any local person. So assertions from residents from out with the locality and out with Angus have been accepted. And I must say, as a local member, that gives me quite a lot of concern. And Ruthven is not, slightly suggested, was a tiny little place. It's got about 30 houses. So you'd think somebody would write in support. The road, yes, we've looked at, and thanks to the description of the road and answering of questions. But the U100, the access road, is very...
Councillor McMillan Douglas, you're unmuted.
I apologise, convener. I had moved on to the access road, the U100. During the main holiday season in the summer, this will also be the time when the road is at its busiest from agricultural equipment, with combined harvesters, tractors, and other agricultural equipment going down it. This will cause severe congestion, cars and agricultural machinery will be muddled together in an area where there will be children on holiday. It doesn't seem an ideal situation to me. The promised 2 laybys will have to be dug into the steep banks on both sides of the road. Now, I'm sure many people concerned have walked down this road and seen it for themselves, but the beautifully kept dry stone dike on each side and its foundations, which go in deeply down into the earth and into the bank, will presumably have to be moved back into the field on each side, or you're not going to get a combined harvester and a car of any size past each other. I do not know if the owner of those fields, Mr. Lyburn, has given his permission for this. And I suppose there is the issue of who will pay, but that's more a commercial spin-off from the issue. But I do think putting a lay-by into those banks is not going to be the straightforward job that was perhaps suggested. The access road, the U100, has a bad junction onto the Quarry, Ailith, Blairgowrie road. This junction will surely have to be widened with improved access and runoffs. Otherwise, you're just not going to get the number of people out of it without having an accident hazard. This again will presumably involve land being taken from the field. This narrow access road, where all traffic to the projected site will have to travel down, is also the route for the projected electricity substation, creating still more traffic. Moving from the traffic problem, I am concerned about having children on holiday with little to do being close to the ferocious, if I can call it that, River Isla. The area is not called the bottom of Riven for nothing. When I was there over the weekend, the beauty of the river was only equaled by the danger of its steep, often unprotected banks and the swirling water below. Putting a number of young children there seems to me to be setting up a tragedy waiting to happen. The visitors having nothing to do also seems to me to present potential problems. Where will they go? Presumably into Ailith and Blairgowrie, which, if I'm going to be very narrow-minded, does not have a great benefit to Angus. And what will this do to the caravan sites in the area? Neither of which, and I checked yesterday, are filled at the moment. So will that lead to pressure for people to actually move into a more residential state on this particular site? So the proposed static home site, if I can call it that, seems to have very little benefit to the local community and to Angus, whilst it will create major problems for this community. Although I normally always support business developments, and my colleagues and opponents will know this, for these reasons, I would urge the committee to reject this application. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor McMillan-Douglas. Now, you will need to unlock yourself.
Convener, members could ask Councillor McMillan-Douglas any questions.
Oh, is that? My apologies. I didn't realise there was questions to the local member. Any questions to the local member?
Councillor Durno.
Thanks, Convener. Councillor McMillan-Douglas, you're saying about the river being, could be quite dangerous. Is there any way that that could be used for water sports at all? Like canoes and things like that. If it was, turned into a water sort of area, can you fish on it, or can you do anything with that river?
Well, excuse me. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Councillor Denner? Yeah. You can certainly fish on it further down, but when it's in spate, as it is at the moment, you really couldn't do anything else on it. I suppose I suppose if you were very brave, you could do canoeing of an Olympic standard, but the risk is that the banks are very steep. It's the most beautiful area. As part of my board, I commend people to go and see it. It is the most beautiful area, and it goes down the river. But these banks are really quite dangerous if you don't understand them.
That's great. Thanks for that. That's great.
Any other questions?
Councillors Duff and Moore.
Councillor Duff.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of maybe, I mean, Councillor Macmillan Douglas is making the point that it's beside a river and that's dangerous. Could I perhaps suggest that, I mean, it's a long time since I spent much time in caravan sites, but most of the caravan sites I've ever been to are either beside the sea, which is also hazardous, or beside rivers. It is kind of what you normally expect. And, you know, there is a risk, but there's a risk at a seaside location, and there's a risk beside, I mean, I can think of lots of caravan sites beside lochs where there's equally a risk with children going into water and getting out of their depth. So I think that's a slightly spurious point to raise. I don't think this is any worse than many of the other ones I can think of. Well, not a question, but it's...
If I could respond to
Yes,
Councillor Duff's non-question, of course I accept his point that we've all got, there's a balance here, of course, between risk and enjoyment. I totally agree with Councillor Duff on this. I just think that this is a particularly dangerous point because of the very high banks and the swirling river. You couldn't have chosen a much more dangerous one, actually. Yeah, but I do take his general point that, of course, life is full of risks as well as benefits.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Convener. I'm slightly amused by Councillor Macmillan Douglas's comments about the difficulty about the roads and then commending it, and we ought to go and see it. But I don't know the site, and I'm just interested. Would there be any way of fencing the river off to make the site safer?
Is that a question to me, Councillor Moore?
Yes, in your view, could it be done?
Yes, I'm sure it could be done. Yes, it just, I didn't see it in the papers as a proposal. I'm sure it could be done. There actually is a pathway which really I would have thought should have been protected by a proper fence for residents some time ago, but frankly, the whole area has been neglected.
Thank you.
Any other questions to Councillor Macmillan Douglas?
No other questions, Convener.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Convener. I'll leave your meeting.
Yes. Can you confirm that Councillor Macmillan Douglas has left the meeting?
That's our way, Convener.
Yes. We'll move on to our speakers now. First speaker is Liz Hamilton. Liz Hamilton, can you come in?
Mrs. Hamilton is currently on mute, Convener. I'm not sure whether that was the IT host that did that or whether that was Mrs. Hamilton herself. I'm not sure if someone can confirm that. Okay, so it wasn't the IT host. While Mrs. Hamilton tries to work out how to unmute herself, we could maybe move on to the second speaker, Convener.
Yes, okay. I'll move on to next speaker, Caroline Anderson. Can you come in?
Oh, sorry, there's Mrs. Hamilton now, Convener.
Thank you. Sorry about that, technology. Good morning. I'm Liz Hamilton, resident at Milton of Ruthven and community councillor for Ruthven on Kirriemuir Landward West. Ruthven is a very quiet rural hamlet of approximately 25, 30 houses. The population is probably no more than about 60 to 80. This planning application of caravan lodges will change the demographic area completely. Most of these lodges will have a capacity of at least 4 residents, more than doubling the population. The size and the density of the site is completely out of character in this agricultural environment and will bring no financial benefit or employment to the local community. There are no shops or local amenities on site or within walking distance. Every time you need a pint of milk, it's a car journey of 6 miles. If you want to go to the pub, it's a car journey. If you need a takeaway meal or a meal out, it's a car journey. If members of the planning have visited this site, they will have realised how the access along the U100 is unsuitable for all the extra proposed journeys. Andrew Carey, the consultant, states that by adding 2 passing places, this will make it all acceptable. What he does not address is the junction from the U100 onto the A926. It is a blind junction with no clear line of sight. A driver has to creep out with the nose of the car over the carriageway into the flow of the oncoming traffic before you have a clear sight, at which point you are a sitting target for any fast bikers approaching Ruthven Bridge or cars. The only comment the consultant has made regarding this junction is there have been no reported accidents. But I can assure you, if you talk to the locals, there have been plenty of near misses. The A926 is a fast road with no provision for pedestrians or cyclists. The bus service offers a very limited timetable to Ailith, Blairgowrie or Kirrimuir. There are no protected bus stops and requires users to stand on the narrow, busy verges. Children waiting for the school bus also stand at this junction of the U100 onto the A926. I feel the increase in traffic would be hazardous to all, especially the pedestrians and cyclists in this quiet area. The government aims to reduce the need for travel, and this site does not demonstrate a sustainable transport, and the increase in vehicular traffic would have an effect on the air quality in the region. The development machine, that is Morris Leslie, has employed every consultant possible to try and negate all the objections raised by the residents. Unfortunately, the locals do not have the same financial backing to counter all their arguments. Morris Leslie states that he plans to sell these lodges, and this opens the door for a very permanent accommodation site. Once these are sold off, who manages the site and who controls the period that these lodges are occupied? I think there are a lot of unanswered questions, and I see no gain for the community of Ruthven, and would strongly recommend that the Planning Committee refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions to Liz Hamilton?
No questions, convener.
No. Right, we'll move on then. Our next speaker is Caroline Anderson.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I am a local resident of Ruthven also, but I'm a little bit more unique in the sense that I am one of the only families in Ruthven, so I have young children, and I can only emphasise how dangerous this site is for children. Not only the site itself, but the actual road leading down to the site is extremely dangerous for children. As you can see from the pictures that were presented by Mr. Taylor, the verge is very steep, so getting out of the way of a tractor or anything like that is extremely hazardous. So yeah, also I would agree with Mrs. Hamilton that the visibility splays coming out of the junction are really difficult. You have to come out basically to middle of the road to get out of that junction, which is again hazardous. There are school children that walk from the Brigton itself to that road, and they, you know, at the minute it's quite a quiet road, but this site would propose more transport, so therefore it would be dangerous for the school children walking that road currently. I would also like to raise the issue of the refuge collection. At the minute, our refuge collection is not the best. It's every second week for general waste. So I do think that's insufficient for a caravan site of this scale. So therefore, I strongly object to this caravan site due to the safety and the risk it would pose to children. Thank you.
Any questions to Caroline? No questions.
No
We'll
questions,
on.
Convener.
Thank you, Caroline.
Sorry, no questions, Convener.
Yes, okay, we'll move on to Edward Clayhills Henderson. Will you please come in?
Yes, can you hear me, Convener?
Yes.
Okay. My name's Edward Clayhills Henderson and I reside at Haulyards House. I have 3 objections to the planning application. Firstly, 41 caravans within 150 metres of the River Isla. This is almost a village on a very small footprint, which should have been returned to arable land. This land has lain derelict, presumably to achieve planning. Is this Angus Council policy going forward? If so, all landowners will rejoice. Number 2, the road network is being upgraded on the U100 from the B954 Meagle to Aylett Road east to the new multi-million pound substation that is being built. The building will be continuing for the next 3 years with a 200 to 220 vehicle flow per day. This road goes to single lane after the substation and will almost certainly be the preferred route to the site, simply through sat-nav use. Has Angus Council consulted fully with Perth and Kinross Council on this pretty scary scenario? Big wide road to narrow road, with 3 private houses, a farm entrance for high health pigs, blind corners and a ditch. Number 3 is for the testing of the water in the summer months in the River Isla as the flow levels drop hugely. This will be when the dirty water outflow will be running at its height. Convener, thank you. That's me. I'm done.
Any questions to Mr. Clayhill Henderson?
No questions, Convener.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on then. Next.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Graham Lyburn. Graham Lyburn, can you come in, please? Mr. Clayhill Henderson seems to be coming up on my screen yet.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you all right, yes.
Yes. Good morning. My objections to this planning application centre around the safety of using the U100. This is the narrow road which passes between our fields, which are on either side, and is the main access road to the proposed residential caravan site. This road is integral to our farming business and is also very popular with the many local people who walk down this road. To address these issues, Angus Council have asked for 2 passing places to be installed, section 1.5 of the Quarry report, with the specification being 5.5 metres wide and 12 metres long. I would like to add at this point, a tractor with a 10-box trailer of potatoes is 17.2 metres long and would not fit into a 12-metre long passing place. The National Roads Development Guide, which I understand all councils follow, provides that all passing places on a new access road should be constructed to a dimension of no less than 6 metres in width, plus 500mm verges on either side. As a concession to existing roads, the national guidelines have relaxed that preference of 6 metres to a minimum width of 5.5 metres, plus the 500mm verges. The applicant is asking the committee to apply a further relaxation to depart from national guidelines and Angus Council's minimum requirement and approve an overall width of the passing places to only 5 metres plus reduced verges of 450mm. In the traffic management report by Andrew Quarry, section 310, the consultant appears to suggest that the committee are entitled to exercise this discretion because the guidelines state that locating passing places is dependent on gaining the maximum benefit balanced with planning legislation. This statement in the guide is talking about the location of passing places and not the width of passing places. Nowhere in the guide does it offer discretion on width. Furthermore, the boundary walls are 1 metre high and are retaining walls for the fields, with the field on the east side being 1 metre above the road. Myself and fellow workers should not be expected to drive heavy machinery along the edge of the field with an unstable boundary wall beneath them, due to the supporting verges being removed. The council have specified they want 5.5 metre passing places plus 500mm verges. Why is it now considered acceptable to depart from carefully considered national and Angus Council guidelines as stated in 3.8 and 3.9 on the Quarry report? I would also like to add, I have never been approached by the applicant or the Quarry transport report about this application. Therefore, have not been asked about the option to have suitable passing places that would look after the safety of both the local people and myself and fellow workers when using the road and working on the fields on either side, and would also help meet Angus Council and national guidelines. If the Planning Committee are minded to approve this application, I would respectfully suggest that it should be conditioned to ensure that the proposed passing places comply with the absolute minimum of Angus Council Roads Department requirement of being 5.5 metres wide and having this 500mm wide verge on either side. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to address the meeting and would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions to Mr. Lyburn?
Councillor Miles, convener, and Councillor Duff.
Councillor Miles.
Yes, Mr. Lyburn. With relation to the fields, the neighbouring fields you have on either side of that U100 road, is that the main or only access to these fields through that road, or is there other access?
There is access, there's several access points on the field below the steading. The main access is down by the Brickton Nursery entrance, which is probably our widest access. Otherwise, we have to go through the steading, and with some of the longer trailers, that can be a bit tricky. On the other side of the road, our access is either down on the south side, which is on the single track road that Mr. Clayhills Henderson spoke about, or in the top half of the farm, we can access onto the main road at that point as well.
Yeah, but that is the main, quite a number of operations, is it?
Sorry?
The main access for quite a number of operations is...
Well, yes, you'll find that, so some of the fields right at the roadside, that, you know, the lower half of the farm, your access will come onto the U100 and you can then come up the U100 onto the main road. But it's obviously an integral, I mean, there's at certain points during harvest, we'll have grain trailers going one way so as we can work a one-way system, so they are using that road, and then you combine it with what's going on in the neighbouring Brigton farm at the same time, and we have quite a lot of tractors and trailers. But we will do our own management system where we are working so that tractors and trailers do not meet each other on the road. So, but we are using that road ourselves in a one-way system, if you can understand what I mean.
You've confirmed my thoughts that say tractor and trailers meeting on that road wouldn't be suitable for passing anyways, or wide combines or any other wide vehicles. It would be unsuitable for passing in its present state, and hence the reason that passing places there are essential. Thank you.
Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, convener. My question slightly related to the Councillor Miles's question, and I'm not that familiar with the location, so forgive me for the questions. Mr. Lyburn, I'm correct in assuming that you own the land on either side of the U100, is that correct?
Yes, yes.
And you are normally will drive long, wide vehicles along that road, is that correct?
During potato harvest, bulb harvest, yes. During harvest operations, that's correct.
So could I put it to you that as you own the land on either side, it would be perfectly possible for you to install a passing place to allow your large, long vehicles to use the road safely? Would that not be correct?
No, what we will do in our circumstance, we will work a one-way system with our own traffic, so we know that we have none of our own tractors and trailers meeting each other. But I can't, obviously we have to look out for neighbouring farmers if they happen to be using it. But at the minute, the traffic on that road is manageable. Obviously, we haven't encountered the SSE traffic at the minute because they've just started their work. But I can see that might be an issue for us over the next year or so. And obviously, we are going to counter the caravan traffic. And the traffic I'm speaking about just now, we're all used to that road, we understand it. And if we see each other working on the road or in the fields beside it, we do accommodate each other and make sure that we can use the road safely without having, what's the word I'm looking for, without having traffic going in both directions.
Yeah, I mean, I understood. I mean, can I probably suggest that this is a road of some antiquity? It's not a modern road. The fact that it's a U indicates it's probably a tarred cart track, if I could put it that way, and it hasn't been widened. And one of the issues is over the last 60 years, agricultural vehicles have got much wider, much longer, and much heavier. And it's clearly now struggling to cope with that sort of traffic. That would be correct, would it?
Well, we can cope with that traffic as long as we can work on a system within ourselves where we make sure we're not meeting on that road. But as you can see on the road, if a large vehicle enters at the top, they do not have the visual view to see if there's a car coming out of the Brigton nursery at the same time. And at the minute, the cars coming out there might be, I don't know, maybe half a dozen. So it's feasible. You can accommodate each other, and local people know either to back up or we know to allow them the space to come up the road if we can see them in time. But if you have, obviously a lot of traffic from people who are not used to the area, that's not going to happen.
Okay, right. I have one question, Graham. Regarding, I have driven down the road. I'm quite surprised you haven't comment on the moving of the bankings to get the passing places in. You know as well as I do that the foundations of dikes protrude out below the dikes, and which will be going into that banking. I find it difficult to see how they can create these passing places without affecting the founds of your Drystone Dyke.
Well, I made a note. I didn't have enough time to bring that up, but I made a note on one of somebody's comments. I think it was Mr. Taylor's comments, that if the boundary wall was damaged when they were making the passing place, it would then become a civil matter between myself and Maurice Leslie, and I don't think that's very fair to that. I shouldn't be put in that position. It'll be impossible to build these passing places and not touch the boundary walls.
Okay, right, thank you for that. Any other questions to Mr. Lyburn?
Councillor Braes and Councillor Moore, convener.
Councillor Braes.
Yes, I must apologise, convener, but I really need some guidance, perhaps from officers. Mr. Lyburn has raised concerns about the width of the passing places and their compliance with our policy, and I would really appreciate it if officers could address that for me, please.
Sorry, is that a question for me? I missed the last bit of that.
Yes, Mr. Lyburn raised concerns about the width of the passing places that we require as a condition, and raised concerns that they don't really apply with our policy. Could you address that for me, please?
Yes, well, on the national guidelines, which all councils follow, the policy is meant to be 5.5 metres, and the traffic management report is trying to suggest that you should then move it further down to 5 metres, which I think is in. Sorry, I'm trying to look at the sections on the report, but they're suggesting they should move it down to 5 metres, and then you're suggesting that you should propose the passing of this application.
Could officers address that for me, please, convener?
I need to take advice. Is that allowable at this the stage we're at? Can we go back to the officers?
I think, convener, from our point of view, I think that would be fine for that point to be confirmed if Mr. Taylor has the answer to that question. Okay,
Mr. Taylor, can you come in?
Certainly, convener. I will ask for some input from my colleague in the road service, but just before I do that, what I would note is the transportation assessment that was submitted with the application suggested that no passing, it didn't suggest any mitigation was required for the development. So the passing places have come about as a result of officers going back to the applicant and suggesting that having regard to what's in the representations that have been submitted, it would probably be beneficial if they could provide some form of passing places. So just to state that the transport assessment didn't suggest that was necessary. The passing places have come about because officers have asked for that. Can I ask my colleague, Mr. Barnes, to comment on the standards, please?
Thanks, Ed. Thanks for that. Yes, as Mr. Lyburn said, the guide is for new roads. What we're dealing with here is an existing road, and they're proposing to fit the best passing place width in that they can possibly fit within the existing road. 5 metres is sufficient for 2 cars to pass, and at the end of the day, the development will generate cars, not tractors and trailers.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? Where were we now? Councillor Braes?
Yes, that's fine, thanks.
Am I correct in saying Councillor Duff has a question?
I think we've already heard from Councillor Duff. It's Councillor Moore, convener.
Moore. Thank you, convener. Just that point, if I could take it up with Mr. Barnes.
Questions to Mr. Lyburn at the moment, I think.
Yeah, but I just need to get some clarification from Mr. Barnes before I ask the question of Mr. Lyburn.
Okay, right. Andy, are you there?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Councillor Moore.
You've just said that the guidance is for new roads, but this is an existing road and 2 cars can pass. So if it's an existing road, why don't we take the existing traffic, which is farm traffic, into consideration? Why are we just saying 2 cars?
As Mr. Taylor explained, the transport assessment has looked at the number of vehicles using the road. We're speaking about, on average, an extra 7 cars an hour. We have to view this in terms of the existing planning permission that exists on the site, which is for a tree nursery, which in itself would have generated traffic as well. So it's a bit of a balancing act between the 2 stances, and you can only fit a passing place in the road that you can fit. 2 cars will be able to pass in those passing places if they are provided.
Right, thank you. Mr. Liben, how often would you take tractor or large machinery down the U100?
We would take, well, if you took, say we did half our produce down that road from that farm, and we have maybe 1,000 tons of potatoes to come off the farm each year, plus all the grain. I couldn't give you all the figures, but that's, we must be looking, 200 journeys down that road, 300 journeys. And I mean, I'm very confused because it's telling me that the national guidelines for that road is 5.5 metres, and the traffic Mr. Barnes is saying, but hang on, we can do it at 5 metres, and yet the Angus Council guidelines are saying no, it should be 5.5 metres. So it's very confusing.
To us as well.
It says that in the traffic management report in 310.
Right. Thank you very much.
Any more questions to Mr. Liburn?
Councillor Brown, convener.
Councillor Brown.
Councillor Brown, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself first, please?
Okay, do you hear me now?
Yes, Councillor Brown.
We were talking about the passing places and how tight they're going to be, and the dry stone dike being in jeopardy of collapse. Would it not be possible first of all, is it the applicant that's going to have to pay for the passing places? And I'm certain it would be possible for them to be built with a dike in front of your dike, Mr. Liburn, to save any slippage there. Would you think that would be possible?
I don't think you wouldn't then get your width. You wouldn't get the width that you require for your passing place.
Okay.
Okay, right, thank you. Any more questions to Mr. Liburn? No. Okay, right, thank you. We'll move on then to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Mr. Brough. Could you come in, please? Mr. Liburn, you're still coming up?
Is that it?
No.
Convener, once the next speaker starts to address the committee, that should change your screen.
Okay, right. Mr. Brough, are you available?
He's muted.
Convener, the gentleman is currently muted. I'm not sure whether he can unmute himself.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is David Brough. I reside at East Jordan Farm, a farm very close to the Bigton of Rutland. I've lived there all my days and worked at the Bigton of Rutland at one point when I was a student, when it was a nursery. My main concerns regard the safe use of the U100 road. And we all know that the application is for 41 holiday caravans, and we feel that if the application is successful, it will have a detrimental effect and cause congestion at harvest times and busy farming times of the year, with the with the traffic that's coming from the caravan side. I also note in the ACTT report, which is an Appendix 2 passing place report, that no mention of existing traffic is considered. And there are 10 homes served by this road and 2 proposed redevelopments and a quarry which is on the Brigton farm. These have not been taken into consideration in the report. The biggest part of it is, as far as I can see, is the amount of heavy produce coming off the farms that road is served. And if you take the Brigton farm on its own, it produces in the region of 1,800 tonnes of root crops, 300 tonnes of grain, plus broccoli, plus peas. Now, if you take that in consideration, that's all got to come off in 10-tonne tractor trailers. These tractors and trailers are now 17.5 metres long, weighing 18 tonnes. They're not small bits of kit. It's not a good environment for domestic cars and tractors especially on that new road. Now, if you take the other 2 farms which are served by that road, it could be up to 1,200 trips at harvest time, considering going in both directions. The transport of the modern tractor and trailer of today is designed to travel at 50 kilometres per hour and are often 17.5 metres long and weighing over 18 tonnes. The passing places that have been proposed are only 12 metres long. They're not long enough. They're certainly not wide enough either. As a result, the proposed passing places are just simply not suitable for the safe passage of domestic and agricultural vehicles, which are not a good mix. Now, the ACTT report states that narrow verges will minimise damage to vehicles and existing boundaries walls. This is done by the author of the ACTT report. In stating that, the author is suggesting accidents will themselves be likely, using the form minimise strongly suggests that he's minimising the risk, but it's not eliminating the risk. There's 93 traffic journeys a day are suggested from the lodges alone. I suggest that we refuse this application on the basis of safety on the U100 road. Thank you very much for your time.
Any questions to Mr. Brough?
No questions, convener.
No questions, Mr. Brough. Okay, move on to the applicant's agent now. Mr. David.
Convener, before we move on to the agent, a number of the objectors have raised the matter of the new substation. This is not shown on our maps. Can the officers advise us where it is? Because I can't relate any substation to the maps I've got in front of me.
Okay, officers, can you throw any light on this?
Convener, it's not, to my knowledge, it's not within the Angus Council area. So the way we've dealt with impacts on the surrounding area, as in the Perth and Kinross Council areas, we've consulted with Perth and Kinross Council, and they've indicated that having regard to development within their area, they're satisfied that the development wouldn't result in unacceptable impacts on the local road network. So we've left that to Perth and Kinross Council, who's been consulted on the application, and they're satisfied this development could coexist with development within their area.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor King? We'll move on anyway. We'll move on to...
Convener, can I just have a follow-up to Councillor King's question? I mean, perhaps, Mr. Taylor seems to know more about this than we do. The proposed work at the SSE substation, that is a project of some sort or other, which will have a start point and an end point. Is that correct?
Sorry, Councillor, I can't shed any light on the project within the Perth and Kinross Council area. As I say, we've consulted them and they're satisfied in terms of their response that this development could coexist with development within that local authority area.
Okay, so we will have to make an assumption that this will be a project of a number of months or 1 year or whatever to upgrade a substation, and it isn't going to be continual traffic, I would guess. That's the assumption I'm going to make, unless I get any information to contrary.
Okay, I think we've really got the...
Can I come back in? I was muted when you cut me off there. I just want to confirm with Mr. Taylor that this substation does not impact on the junction of the A926 and the U, whatever it is, 100.
So I can't.
If it's not in our area,
Yes.
it doesn't impact on that junction.
So a transport assessment has been carried out, which considers the development could coexist with other development in the surrounding area. I haven't got precise details of that other development, which is not within Angus, so I can't give you a conclusive statement on that.
But Mr. Taylor, if it's not within Angus, it does not impact on the junction of the A926 and the U100.
I think that's a reasonable assumption, Councillor King.
No, they want to know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, I think we've really got to move on. I think this is getting a bit irrelevant. So, okay, there's someone come onto the screen, so please unlock. I'm calling on Mr. David Quarry to come in now, the applicant's agent.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is David Carapel and I'm representing the applicant, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I did say this morning, but it's now this afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank officers of Angus Council for their thorough and fair assessment of the planning application. The applicant genuinely believes that the officer input has resulted in a quality proposal which will be of great benefit to the area. The application site, as you've already heard, is the former tree nursery site and is now unused. With the closure of the nursery, the applicant identified an opportunity to redevelop the site for beneficial purposes. However, the applicant also recognised that the proposal would only succeed if it would benefit the local area economically and would not compete with other established businesses. Therefore, the very first thing that the applicant did was gauge the opinion of local businesses, and a survey of such businesses was carried out in January of this year. In total, 72 local businesses were approached about the proposal. 50 of these businesses supported the proposal and only 3 were against it. 19 businesses were either neutral or did not respond. It was with this overwhelming local business support that gave the applicant the confidence to proceed with the planning application. In the very uncertain economic times that we all live in today, and which no doubt will continue for some time to come, the applicant is confident that the proposal will bring tourists and visitors to the area. It is anticipated that these will be primarily family groups or small groups who want to enjoy the many and varied attractions of Angus that Angus has to offer. The applicant envisages a 5-star holiday site occupied by high-quality lodge-style caravans, and I hope committee members have had the opportunity to view the styles of lodges proposed that are displayed on the council website. I note there have been no objections from either internal or external consultees to the proposal. A lot of hard work has gone into addressing issues raised at the pre-application stage and in the early life of the planning application. It is also encouraging to note that Angus Council planning officers consider that the proposal complies with the adopted development plan policies. I am, however, also aware that concerns have been raised by third parties about a variety of matters, many of which have been discussed already. I would like to assure anyone with concerns that the holiday caravan site will be a good neighbour. The holiday caravans are aimed at purchasers, and the target purchasers are those aged 55 and over. Typically, they will enjoy the local area and make best use of the local amenities such as the countryside itself, flora and fauna, golfing, fishing, local shops, restaurants and visitor attractions. Planning officers have recommended a condition that ensures that the lodge-style caravans will be used for holiday purposes. This is entirely correct and fully supported by the applicant. Layered on top of this will be the requirements of the caravan site licence, which again will ensure that caravans are used for holiday purposes only. Lastly, all purchasers will enter into legally binding agreements, which again ensures that the caravans will only be used for holiday purposes. As you've already heard, the site is discreetly located, sits some distance from any third-party properties. A comprehensive and sensitive landscaping scheme will ensure that the caravan site will sit comfortably within the local landscape. In fact, it could be said that the proposal will be a better neighbour than the former site, as there will be no longer regular HGV movements along the adjacent U100 road. Passing places are being introduced, as you've heard, and on the U100, which will be a betterment to the current situation. It's very likely that demand for local tourism accommodation will continue to grow in the future within the Angus area. The proposal before committee today will help meet this demand. The officer report before you this morning concludes by stating that the proposal complies with the development plan policy subject to the proposed planning conditions, and there are no material considerations that would justify refusal of the planning application. I would therefore respectfully request that committee supports the proposal and grants planning permission. Just in terms of some of the comments that have been made, I'd just like to clarify some matters just for committee's benefit. In terms of waste, there will be a commercial waste contract in place, so there'll be no burden on the normal local authority waste disposal services. Again, traffic movements associated with the caravan parks are out with normal peak periods in non-COVID times. The caravans themselves will be extremely high quality, and they will have timber cladding effects. The caravan site itself is some 150 metres away from the River Isla, and between the caravan site and the River Isla, there are already established houses. So I'd like to just conclude with that, and very happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Right. Any questions to the applicant's agent?
Councillor Durno, convener. And
Councillor
Councillor
Durno.
Miles.
Okay, well, thanks, convener. I'd just like to ask Mr. if I can pronounce your name properly.
Carapel.
Let me just get the site, you know, really on my head here. What you're basically saying is that the 41 caravans will be sold to persons who will then let them out to other persons as holiday homes. So the persons that are buying the caravans will actually be in charge of the caravans, and once those caravans are sold, will your client not have anything to do with the caravans after they've been sold? Will they be mainly looked after themselves, as in the area, as in the gardens and all the things round about? Are they being sort of sold like mini houses, but they're actually residential caravans that will be let out? Is that really?
No, sorry, that's a slight misunderstanding. The caravans will be sold, and it's the occupiers who will then holiday in them. So they're almost like second homes that people wish to purchase. So rather than, for instance, buying a local home, which perhaps a local person might want to live in as a residential home, and a third party perhaps buys up that home and uses it for holiday use, they will be using these caravans themselves for holiday purposes for themselves and their family. The caravan site itself will still remain within the ownership of the applicant. The caravan purchasers pay what's called a pitch fee each year, and that pitch fee goes towards maintaining the caravan site, ensuring that the drainage is working correctly and the roads and footpath in the site is well maintained. So there's always a 100% presence by the applicant within the site. All that the caravan owners are doing is purchasing the right to place a bought caravan on the site. I hope that explains the situation.
You're muted, Councillor Durno.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say thanks for that. It was just to clarify that it wasn't actually going to be a caravan holiday park as such. It will be residential people that will be deciding who's actually going to be staying in their caravan. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Miles.
Yes, convener. Thank you. Mr. Carapel, we've heard quite a number of objections, and a lot relating to the access route along the unclassified Route 100. And another objection was the visibility coming out of that junction. Now, I would imagine the visibility on egress could be mitigated by a mirror placed in an appropriate location on the lead out to let out that junction see what's coming along the main road. Would that be your intention, maybe doing something in that lines?
I'm not a road engineer and I couldn't comment on that. All I can advise is that the council's roads engineer has looked at the proposal in the round, including the upgrades that have been asked for by the council officers to the U100 in terms of the passing places. In terms of the junction, the council's roads engineer has found that to be acceptable, and therefore, unless I'm advised otherwise, the junction, there's no intended changes proposed by the council's roads engineer. And again, I would just again re-emphasise that this is a formal commercial site that would have had traffic movements, including HGV movements in the past. So it's not as if the traffic, which is very minimal in terms of only one car every 7 to 10 minutes, is being generated in relation to nothing having been there before. There was traffic generation from the previous use of the site.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Other questions or concerns were the dry stone dyke. Would these be reinforced when the passing places were constructed? And my final point I'll bring up just now, would the visitors that are accessing the site be made aware and asked to take consideration of agricultural traffic using it, especially in busy harvest times? Because it would be helpful if visitors or residents coming into the site were at least aware of these heavy use issues at harvest times.
In terms of the passing places, the passing places will be constructed entirely within the road verge, which forms part of the adopted road, and therefore any passing places that are constructed have to be approved by the council as the roads authority, because it is within the part of the road that is adopted by the council. In terms of just making holidaymakers aware of the general situation, the applicant does intend to have information available both at the site and as part of the information packs for any purchasers, and that's it wouldn't be an issue to ensure that all holiday caravan site occupiers are aware of the general road conditions.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Councillor Duff and Councillor Moore, convener.
Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Just to ask Mr. Quarry to clarify, we're hearing, we heard about caravans and then it was static caravans. We're now talking about lodges. What physically are we actually talking about here? Because I'm still a little bit confused.
It can be confusing. There's quite a lot of generic terms for caravans, because a caravan can vary from a very small towing caravan that you see up in the Highlands and all over the place being towed behind a car, right up to quite a large static caravan, which is often called a twin unit caravan. I've referred to the caravans on this site as lodge style caravans. So they are legally defined as caravans. They have a chassis and they have wheels, and they come in two parts onto the site and they're bolted together on the site, and that's why they're called twin unit caravans. So they are legally defined as caravans, but they have the appearance of lodges in as much as they have a timber cladding effect, sloping roofs, and so forth. But they are legally and technically caravans.
Thank you. And just one sort of supplementary question. You said that obviously your the applicant is going to retain ownership of the site. Would it be their intention to have the site staffed in any way with a manager or an attendant or whatever?
That's not the current intention. The applicant owns a lot. You may have seen on the plans that were produced earlier on in the briefing by Mr. Taylor, but the applicant owns a lot of land and properties immediately adjacent to the site. It may be that there's something that can be done there, or else the site will be manned. There will be visits to the site. There will be website addresses, email addresses, telephone numbers. So it's not strictly speaking necessary for there to be an on-site management presence. But if that was considered prudent or desirable, that would be something we could approach the council about. But that's not the intention at the moment.
Thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, convener. Mr. Quarry, how would you enforce non-residents if you sell the caravan or lodge or whatever to somebody? How would you stop them from coming in and occupying it all year round?
Do you mean on a residential basis?
Yes.
Well, as I explained in my brief presentation, that there's in effect 3 layers of enforcement available to both the council and the applicant. The first 2 layers are enforcement by the council through conditions on the planning permission, and also that the site licence that will be issued, that would be applied for and subsequently issued by the council would be a site licence for holiday caravans only. So the council itself has 2 layers of control in that regard. The third layer of control that the applicant has is that each purchaser of caravans enters into a legally binding contract to occupy the caravans for holiday purposes only. And this is the same for every single caravan site throughout the length and breadth of the UK. This site is no different at all to any other holiday caravan site. If there was any suspected breaches, the ultimate sanction that the applicant could have would be to expel the caravan owner from the site. That's the ultimate sanction. But the applicant is fully aware that this is a holiday caravan site and will be maintained and managed as a holiday caravan site, and there's ample layers of enforcement to ensure that's the case.
Right, and you say it's for the purchaser to use for themselves. What's to stop them subletting it?
It's for themselves and their family. What I tend to find with other caravan sites I've dealt with in terms of purchasers is that they do very much buy the caravans as a second home, a holiday home, if you like, and for them and their family and their friends to use long weekends, holiday periods, summertime, Christmas time, etc. So it's each caravan purchaser has, they're all sort of individuals and family groups, so they've got their own aspirations for their individual caravans. In terms of subletting, some caravan sites do that, and that's if it complies with conditions and it complies with the caravan site license requirements, and it's something that's desirable to the applicant, that is a potential as well. But again, that's no bad thing, in as much as it means that that there's an all year round visitors coming to the local area, especially during the shoulder months, perhaps the quieter months of the year, which is all benefit to the local economy.
Last question. We're banging on about sustainable travel. Everybody's talking about sustainable travel. Now, we've heard that it's 6 miles to the shops. It's same sort of distance for anything else. So how can you claim that this would be sustainable in travel terms? Because it's the back beyond.
The site I would suggest is not in the back of beyond. It's a short distance, a short drive to local amenities, shops, restaurants, public houses, and so forth. But likewise, it's a short cycle ride as well. The applicant envisages that because these are holiday caravans to purchase, that, for instance, just normal day-to-day shopping, there will be, a big shop, for want of a better phrase, where any occupier is well stocked up with milk and bread and all the usual day-to-day necessities. And the whole purpose of looking to develop the site here is to allow individual holiday occupiers to enjoy what's around them. So it's very much, as I said in my presentation, that the site is targeted for those perhaps over the ages of 55 years who want to enjoy the immediate local area, the fishing, the golfing, walking, bird watching, flora and fauna. A lot of the holiday caravan sites I deal with, holiday occupiers tend to stay very local because they buy a holiday caravan in a particular area because they like the immediate area, and that's where they enjoy themselves. So I would suggest that it's an opportunity for people to get out and about, to cycle, to walk, to be sustainable, to get fit, and enjoy everything that this part of Angus has to offer.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Councillor Cheap, convener.
Councillor Cheap.
I lowered my hand. I'd wait till comments, convener.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions to the applicant's agent? I have one question. You say there was 72 businesses interviewed, what percentages of that would be in Perthshire, very close to the Perthshire border? And you're speaking about the benefits of golf courses and what have you, and would those be mostly in Perthshire?
Councillor, I understand it was a combination of both. It wasn't myself that did the interviews, it was the applicant. But I understand that they interviewed businesses both in Perthshire and Angus Council area, because obviously the businesses interlink between both areas because the boundary of both areas is so very close to this site.
So you would agree that the closest golf courses and shopping would be in Perthshire?
In terms of geography, quite possibly, but that's not to say that occupiers of the caravans wouldn't enjoy everything that Angus has to offer as well.
Great, thank you. Any more questions? All right, thank you for answering all those questions, Mr. Quarry, if that's correct.
That's very good, thank you very much.
Okay, right, thank you. Right, we'll move on to comments now. If you can unlock yourself, Mr. Quarry.
No, it's okay, convener. I think your screen's just set up slightly differently. So once the next member starts speaking, they'll come up. So we've got Councillor Nicholl, Councillor Cheap, and Councillor Miles.
Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, convener. I've got great concerns about this application. 41 residential caravans accessed along a small narrow lane, the U100, with a very blind junction connecting to the A926, and a modest assessment of 90 vehicles journeys per day along this track to the caravan site. An accident waiting to happen. This is a rural site on first-class agricultural ground. There's no amenities, shops, restaurants, public houses in the area. The nearest amenities is in the next county. This development would not bring any economic benefit to Angus. There is a danger from the River Isla. It is prone to flash floods, and it's a place that kids would be inclined to play. Also, the outflow from the caravan site, sewage, could cause problems with health, wildlife, and environment. I agree with the representations against this application. This caravan site has no place in Ruthven. I would be inclined to bring an amendment against this application after all councillors have commented. Thank you, convener.
Okay, thank you. We have Councillor Cheap.
Yeah, thanks, convener. There's a few things that Councillor Nicholl has just said that I do agree with. I think it just seems very odd that this has been plonked right in the middle of nowhere, effectively. And I just wonder if it's just because they want to use the land and get a commercial gain from it. You know, I was born and brought up with caravans, and people who buy static homes, whether they're lodges, dressed up or whatever, do them to get a return on investment. And a lot of them will use them for families, certainly initially, but they will want to use up the empty weeks and they will rent out to people. And thus we have people who are short-term users and may not know basically the lie of the land and how operations should be going there. The fact that there is no no site agent there, no site manager controlling this on a day-to-day basis would concern me as well. And I have the whole point of access to the use of, we've talked about the U100 there, it just seems to me it's totally out of place. So along with what Councillor Nicholl's saying, I'd be thinking here, is there a potential to, because listening to representations, I can understand a lot of their concerns in this case. It's not just representations and for the sake of it. If anything, I'd be thinking to defer this for councillors, committee members to actually have a much better look at the site and just see how appropriate it is. But I'll wait to hear what everybody else has to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
Thank you, convener. I'm very well aware of development of this nature, as I live relatively close to a very similar one at the banks of the River North Esk, which is as dangerous, if even not more so, than the Isle at this point. Prior to that caravan site being constructed, I had very similar concerns to that of the Riven residents and a lot of the objections we've heard today. But since that site was developed, most of these concerns were found to be unfounded, and it didn't create the same sort of problems. So I would be more amenable to accept that a lot of the concerns that are raised today may not be founded. I do have concerns, however, over the road, and I think a suggestion of at least a mirror installation at the exit of the 100 onto the main road would be desirable, if not essential, for residents getting visibility coming out and in. I recognise that has operated as an exit and egress in the past, and that maybe hasn't been a concern, but I do have concerns over that. And I also have concerns that if the passing place is constructed, they need to be long enough and wide enough to accommodate any agricultural machinery that has to pass any car that's coming in and out of that site. So, but on the whole, I'm minded to go along with the application. Thank you.
Any more comments?
Councillor Durno, Councillor Duff, and Councillor Cheap. I presume you didn't wish to make any further comment.
Councillor Durno.
I'd just have to say that we have had experience, obviously, in our growth with caravan parks, and I do know a lot of people like to go to lodges, and of course we won't be travelling abroad so much this year. So I do think people are looking for lodges, and there are some in some really remote places, because I've been to them, and there's not a shop or anything. But I do think that this application should have worked. I know they said they contacted the community, but I think they should work more with the community, because if the community doesn't have a shop, if this plan could be change slightly, maybe not so many caravans, incorporate maybe a farm shop that could work with the farmers, you know, involve the community. I think the plan at the moment is basically 41 caravans just on the site, nothing else, nowhere to go. So I'm not happy with the plan the way it is, and I think it should be enjoyed by everybody in the area, and it should be more of a community thing, bring people into the country, but also bring in some services for them as well. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I guess I've quite a number of things I would say. I mean, to start with Councillor Moore's point about sustainable travel, I mean, the only logical, if you object to this site on that basis, we're basically saying we don't want any tourists in Angus, because the only way you can get sustainably is by rail to Arbroath and Montrose. There is no airport in Angus, and long distance buses tend to stop at Dundee. So what Councillor Moore is suggesting is we don't really want any tourism in Angus. The point about we're not going to approve it because it's too close to Perth and Kinross seems an incredibly parochial approach. Are we suggesting that there's going to be an area of Angus round the perimeter that we're not going to allow development because it won't benefit us? What if Perth Kinross did the same thing? That's a ridiculous approach. I find the farming objections somewhat interesting. Here we have a business that uses a road, it's a public road. The business owner, Mr. Lyburn, admits he could build passing places if he wants to, but he's choosing not to. And he seems to think that he's a sole right to use this road, and that another business can't use the road. That seems an incredible position in 2020. Councillor Miles, I think, helpfully gave the analogy of the caravan park in his area up the Glenesk Road. I was thinking of one I know quite well on Loch Earn. It's on the south side of Loch Earn, and it is significantly larger than this. It must have 200 or 300 units. Now, the south side of Loch Earn is a single track road, and I think from memory, it's about 5 miles from St. Fillan's village. So we have a single track road supplying a caravan site with 400 or 500 units. It's been in existence for probably most of my adult life, so let's say 50 years, and it's a very successful site. And also, it is right beside water and an extremely deep loch where there's a significant danger. So, you know, let's be sensible about this. A 41 unit caravan park is actually quite a small caravan park. It's not a big one. And if it's successful, we might see some signs, maybe the buses might improve to service the caravan site. So for me, there's a lot of spurious objections here. We are supposed to be looking to develop Angus. Our economic development department are in favour. It's a rural business. We're supposed to be trying to improve our tourism. It complies with policy. It's recommended by officers, and our road service are quite happy with the roads arrangement. The applicant has agreed to build 2 laybys on the U100, and that, I think, has satisfied our roads officers. So for me, if we really believe in developing Angus and developing rural businesses, then I think we should support it.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Councillor Braes and Councillor Moore can be, sorry, Councillor King as well.
Councillor Braes, Moore and King, did you say? Councillor Braes?
Yes, thanks, convener. I do have concerns about this, but my concerns, I think, are more to do with our policy, and that's not a matter for this committee today. I think Councillor Duff makes some very good points, as did Councillor Miles. I think the location within Angus, geographically so close to the border, it's not a matter that we can take into account, because we have a policy for all of Angus. We can't just pick and choose bits. The whole issue of the road, that is my biggest concern by far. But I do recognise that if the agriculture was being conducted as it was 20 or 30 years ago or more, with little tractors and little trailers, this would not be a massive issue. Now, it's entirely possible, it seems to me, for the landowner on each side of that road to address that for himself. He has land there that he can put his own road in to get produce about the farm if he so chooses. And as long as the policy is being applied correctly regarding length and width of the passing places, then that alleviates my concerns very much.
Okay, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, convener. Yes, Councillor Duff has misunderstood me again, just like he doesn't understand that the passing places, not laybys. Laybys you can park in, passing places you don't. I've been looking through the businesses who were consulted and their comments. There's no way of telling where most of the people are. The one that really gets me is, doesn't want more people around us. He likes to play his bagpipes in peace, which I silly don't understand how that can be not opposed to. We have a policy for our roads. It says what our passing places should be, width, length, etc. And I'm concerned that these are not meeting that. However, although the roads issue is very concerning, I don't believe it is something that we could base a refusal on. I think we have to look at the site. Now, there is a concern about it being by the river. If the applicant turned around and said, well, I'm going to fence it off, then that would be wonderful. I do note that there are some comments within all the documentation that I've just looked at that I'm not totally happy with. And Mr. Caripel said that, they were showing what the lodges were like. Well, I've just gone through the entire planning application. There isn't one single picture of a lodge, so I still don't know what we're talking about. However, while I don't like it, I can't find any reason why I should refuse it.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yes, convener.
Oh,
Convener.
yes, sir.
Sorry, convener, just before we hear from Councillor King, we're obviously approaching our 1 o'clock, our 3-hour time limit, and I wondered if it would be appropriate for members to agree that in terms of standing order 21, that we continue the meeting until the conclusion of the business.
Yes, I think.
Can I draw your attention to 2 o'clock council meeting, which I think we have got to be able to make.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll hear from Councillor King anyway. He's probably the last.
Before I start, convener, as you know, I have a diabetic condition. I need to eat. Before the council meeting, I need to have a meal. I would propose that we continue this meeting for 1 hour until 1 o'clock.
5 to 1 now.
Convener, it's 5 to 1 now. In terms of standing orders, we would require members to make a decision in terms of whether they would wish to continue this meeting until the conclusion of the business.
In that case, I would move that we continue this meeting till the conclusion of this item and then adjourn the meeting and reconvene after council.
Seconded.
Agree to that.
Okay. Are we hearing from Councillor King then?
Sorry, sorry, I need to go back. I just need members to agree to that proposal and that Councillor King and Councillor Duff have moved, and that there's no further amendment to continue the business until we're finished. Councillor King's proposal, seconded by Councillor Duff, is
I would move we carry on until we
finish this item, and then we adjourn the meeting and reconvene at the conclusion of the special council meeting, which is scheduled to start at 2 o'clock.
I move we carry on and finish this item and then reconvene later on. So, Councillor King, you're in position to make your comments.
Sorry, convener. Sorry, I have to go back. You said that you moved that. Councillor King and Councillor Duff have already moved that. Are you saying, and are all other members saying that they're happy to agree to that proposal?
Yes.
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you.
I would have been happier to carry on, but depending on how long the other ones last, we can't prejudge that. So I appreciate we need a break between the two.
Okay, thank you.
I continue now, please, convener.
Yes, so therefore we're finishing application number 7 and reconvening later on. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Right.
That's correct, convener.
Yeah. Right, carry on, Councillor King.
Okay, fine, thank you, convener. I've listened to what's been said very, very carefully. I know there's a number of concerns from local residents and from the local landowners. I don't see that these are insurmountable. The matter has been raised about sustainable transport to and from this site, but nobody's ever considered the fact that there is no sustainable transport from the village of Ruthven or the surrounding area. So what's the difference? I personally would not be using a site like this with the lodges on it, but I do use cottages. One of the cottages I use is 11 miles from the main road, with another 20 odd miles before you get a main town. The one I've been using recently is 7 miles from a main town. So this is not exceptional. As far as the road is concerned, yes, the lay-bys will not allow a tractor and a modern trailer to get into it, but it will allow a car to get into it to allow the trailer to pass. And when you're on these roads, you've got to bear in mind the size of the vehicle that's approaching. If on a Highland road on a passing place, and you're in a car and there's an HGV coming forward, you don't try and make the HGV get into the passing place, you get into the passing place and let the HGV pass. This application complies with our policies. The officers are recommending that we agree it, that we approve it. If we find some spurious reasons, like kids playing in the burn, where we're told that the demographic is people aged 55 to 60 who don't normally have young kids with them, then we will get thrown out when the applicant takes this on an appeal to the reporter. I don't think we should be making extra work when we know that if this goes to the Scottish office will approve it because our officers have recommended approval. And I think we've got to take the common sense approach. There's a huge stack of conditions on this to control the situation. Our officers are recommending that we approve it, and I think we should approve it.
Any other comments?
Councillor Dunno, convener?
Councillor Dunno? No. No other comments, we'll move on. Do you have a motion for approval?
Read.
Well, I'm asking for a motion. Is there a motion for approval of this application?
Yes, I will move approval.
Do you have a seconder?
I'll second Councillor King, convener.
Do we have an amendment?
Yes.
Convener, I think Councillor Nicholl had already intimated earlier that he...
Councillor Nicholl?
Yeah, thank you, convener. Convener, my reasons for refusal would be the proposal is contrary to development plan and is not compatible with the local criteria identified in policies DS3 and DS4 and gives rise to unacceptable impacts on the amenity, natural and built environment, road safety and amenity, and the protection of wildlife identified in policies PV4 and PV5. Thank you, convener.
Do you have a seconder? I'll second Councillor Nicholl on the amendment.
Okay, convener, would you just like to go to the vote, unless you wanted to say anything further?
We'll just go to the vote.
Okay, sorry, just before I read out the motion and amendment, if I could just let members know that Councillor Fotheringham has had to leave the meeting, so he won't participate in any vote. So the motion by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Duff, is to approve the application for the reason and subject to the conditions as detailed in the report. The amendment by Councillor Nicholl, seconded by Councillor Lungear, is to refuse the application as the proposal would give rise to unacceptable impacts on the amenity, nature and built environment, road safety and amenity, and the protection of wildlife. Is therefore contrary to policies DS3, DS4, PV4 and PV5 of the local development plan. Please vote motion or amendment. Convener?
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholl?
Amendment.
Councillor Braze?
Motion.
Councillor Brown?
Amendment.
Councillor Cheap?
Amendment.
Councillor Duff?
Motion.
Councillor Durno?
Motion.
Councillor King?
Motion.
Councillor McLaren?
Amendment.
Councillor Moore?
Motion.
Councillor Miles?
Motion.
The application is approved. For the motion, we have 6 votes, and the amendment 5 votes, convener.
Say that again.
There's six votes for the motion, 5 for the amendment. The application is approved.
Okay. Therefore, as an application is approved, it'll be under the conditions that's attached. Is that agreed?
That's correct, convener.
Now we're suspending the meeting.
Yes, if I could just advise members, as per our earlier decision, that we'll adjourn the meeting now and reconvene at the conclusion of the special council meeting. If I could direct members to come back to the meeting on this link that's in the diary, and then that way we can continue the live feed.
Okay, so agreed?
Agreed, but could I ask the officer, will any outsiders be informed of that and when to come back in again?
We will put something on the website, Councillor Miles. There are no further interested parties in terms of participating in the meeting, but we'll see if we could put something on the council website to that effect.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Right.